Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We actually did half an hour of tea time, but we just forgot to go live, so you missed it. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, the podcast is already finished, so thank you guys for watching. Be sure to follow all of us. Follow Brazil on OnlyFans as well. He's going there now. Yeah, he was actually showing us his setup, actually, that he was ready to use there. But unfortunately, like, he's far too hot for OnlyFans these days, so it's no good. You know, it's a tough thing. It really is. But anyway, welcome everyone to TeaTime. Jesting, of course, there. We're about to talk about some elite specializations. And who else better to talk about it, okay, than the Necromancer Man and the Mad Scientist. Boots, it's been a long time. Welcome back. Welcome back to TeaTime.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back.
I've just been waiting for you to invite me again.
Yeah, just waiting there, like, in the shadows.
In the shadows. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we were going to have the full crew, actually, but Inks did not log on, okay, and therefore he does not feel qualified to talk about it, right? Like, that is the level that Inks has become the ultimate doomer. And actually, I realize I've messed up now. Okay, a bit of an introduction on the stream here, guys. But I've just realized that I've messed up. I'm going to have to edit that out. Because if I don't, people are going to flame Inks for not playing the beta now in the comments. And there will actually be, even a tea time where he's not on, he's still going to get roasted in the comment section. And you know what?
Well, that's actually not true. Because everyone's already seen me, and now they've closed the video. They're not watching anymore. just because I'm here.
But they downvote first. They see me, they downvote, and they leave.
Unfortunate. Anyway, so what happened? Well, we've had a beta period for some of the End of Dragons elite specializations for Guardian, Mesmer, and Necromancer, with the Harbinger for Necromancer, Virtuoso for Mesmer, and of course the Willbender for Guardian. Quite an interesting and very different array of elite specializations, actually, compared to anything we've seen so far in the game. And I think, you know, what was interesting to me, actually, with these, just on a broad level, was the way that ArenaNet went about designing them. Like, and this is something that I've been yelling about all week. I'm just going to replicate that right here in maybe a slightly abridged format, is that they are nowhere near as design bloated as Path of Fire. And this has actually led to a fair bit of negative feedback, with the elite specializations feeling pretty weak, particularly in PvP, I think, is where they really don't feel that good. And also a few things in PvE, you know, like, oh, I'm playing Necro, but I've got 11k HP. Where's all my infinite barrier? Why can't I attack everything at the same time? Oh no,
but
what's going on?
Everything else, though.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And like, oh no, I'm on my Willbender. I do damage, but I can't do anything else. Where's my tome? Like, where's my infinite Aegis that I have on my healing skill? Oh no, what a disaster. And that is very curious to me. And you know what? Here's my first take. Here's my first take of the day. I actually hope they keep doing this with the other 6 elite specializations, because it has literally taken them the entire duration of Path of Fire to unpower creep all the Path of Fire specs. And honestly, that's being generous. Realistically, we're still in power creep central pretty much everywhere, right? So it's not even really that true. And I just don't want to see that happen again, because I think people forget how detrimental it really was, particularly to the competitive game modes, World versus World and PvP. I think those really got wrecked by power creep, not just in Path of Fire. HT was guilty of it as well a fair bit. But I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Do you guys think that the power level, kind of the scope of the design, as in what I'm talking about profession mechanics here, the scope of the design, is that good? Or do you guys want to see a little bit more spice, a little bit more juice, you know?
Well, it's a balancing act, right? So you have, well, first of all, there's the argument to make that, like, you want the new elite specs to be really, really good to encourage people to buy the game. Fine. But really, in reality, in a game, you want things to be perfectly balanced. In an ideal world, they would be perfectly balanced in the first beta, but that's never going to happen. So it's like a question between whether or not you think it's better that it's underpowered and it gets tweaked in the betas and better on release, or overpowered and then tweaked in the betas and then better on release. And I think you're right. I think maybe underpowered is the way to go, because if it's overpowered, then they have to nerf it before release, and that'll make people mad. But if they buff it before release, then people won't be quite as mad.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Is it cool if I jump in real fast?
Oh yeah,
too?
yeah.
Okay,
give
cool.
us the details.
I didn't know if Boost was done or not.
I'm done.
But like this, I have a lot of thoughts on this, because like I was at first a little frustrated that like the Harbinger elixirs just kind of like don't really do anything. The only one that I like honestly have a problem with is the heal skill. We could talk about that later, but like they don't really do anything exciting. They just kind of like give boons, and like one is a stun break. But I was thinking, like the core guardian like virtues, like they don't really do anything. They give like something that's a little bit unique, has like a little bit of utilities, and that's fine. And like advance, the old like retreat, whatever you want to call it, like they just kind of give some stuff. Like all of the shouts in the game give like some boons or do something simple. And I guess everyone's comparing the elixirs to like the necro or the engineer elixirs, which do like crazy unique stuff. But I actually really like, if you think about it in terms of this, I don't have a problem if the elixirs stay the way they are, if they unpower creep all of the POF stuff down to a reasonable level. Because like I had never played Heal Scourge before, literally at all before. And I built one this weekend and went into the strikes, and I realized like I knew it was a broken build, like totally broken because I've seen it. But like it's actually broken. It's ridiculously broken. On Plague Doctor, like there was a group that wasn't the best group, let's be honest. But I was doing 3rd place DPS with Plague Doctor Heal Scourge. Like in groups that were actually decent, like you're doing like 15k plus DPS on a build that reses everyone every 10 seconds and gives barrier. It's just too strong. Like the elixirs will never compare to that. And like just the new designs in general, like they're very I think they're in a place where they could make them very purity of purpose and very like unique in terms of like how they play, how they look, how they do stuff, like the design of the specialization. But like I'm fine with them not being like particularly strong. Like Virtuoso, like it's kind of but I'm okay with it being kind of as long as everything else is like actually balanced. Like if they do that, I'm cool with it. I'm cool with like where they are.
Yeah, but that's not to say that they aren't currently undertuned for at least for PvP, right? Like a Willbender has a hard time against a core warrior sometimes now.
And Harbinger, like Harbinger does a shitload of DPS and PvE. It does. Like there are things that they do really, really well. And like the boon support Harbinger build it's a little brain dead AFK, which I have a problem with. But like it's a good build. Like it's solid. It does a good job at what it's supposed to do. But I think like the Firebrand can play, like Guardian right now can play every role in the game, and it can do it better than pretty much anyone else can. And like Firebrand is just too broken. It's way too broken. And Scourge is just too broken. It's the same thing. It does multiple roles better than anything else. Like they're just way too broken. And then there are some like I've never seen anyone play Spellbreaker at all outside of PvP or War of the World, so I don't know if it's good or not. But like, there's stuff that like I don't ever see, and then there's stuff that like you can't go anywhere without seeing like 5 of them in a group. I think they're just too broken. Like just POF is just too broken, honestly.
So priority for you is scale down the POF specs, a few of them anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the POF specs need to be tuned down. I think that they should just be like Heal Scourge. There's no way that it should be able to do 3rd place DPS, like even if the group's average. Heal Scourge needs to probably do like 15k DPS. We talked about that last time. 15k DPS on Heal Scourge with Plague Doctor, like fine. With Celestial, like fine. That's good damage considering what the class brings to the table. And like the utility that Firebrand has too, like it has too much. You can full heal people, and you can give like stability and Aegis and stuff. And there's just on a DPS build, you can play the DPS burn build, and you can do all that stuff too. You can full heal people. You can CC. Like there's just too much. It just does too much stuff.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think you're right about that, But I guess the question is, for the new elite specs, do you like? Obviously, you're not going to try to make them as powerful as those particular specs in POF, but are we going to try to get them at the same level as like Heart of Thorn specs, or what is it? Should everything be the same as elite Heart of Thorn specs?
Well,
or should everything be playable as core as well?
We're also talking a little bit about different categories here, because
Okay.
Scourge and Firebrand are a very specific type of thing. Like, what are they? Like, what makes them so good? The reason these things are so good is because they have a huge amount of like defensive utility baked in. Right? That's essentially the core of it, right? The Scourge is barrier, and with Firebrand it's Aegis, stability, like defensive stuff with some healing on it, and the defensive abilities on the F3 Tome of Courage. Harbinger is the opposite of that, right? Like a lot of these elite specializations that we've seen now, they are all very offensive focused. And I think that in a way, our view of this, and certainly the community's view of these elite specializations, is actually going to be viewed through that lens, and viewed through that lens of why does this not have loads of defensive support? And the reason for that is because ultimately we already have loads of offensive support in the game, and it's also a lot less valuable than than defensive support. Like stuff like giving, oh wow, I can give AoE quickness. Nice. Good time, right? Well, that's not exactly special, is it? But you know what? Giving the entire group 10 target barrier, right, and reviving them every 5 seconds, that is pretty good.
Yeah, and I guess you're right. Like, should we be comparing these to Scourge and Firebrand, or the 3 that we've seen so far, or should we be comparing them more to like Soul Beast and Deadeye? Those are the things that they're supposed to be emulating, you know?
I actually agree. I think this is why it's maybe not as extreme as you might think. These are very obviously not supposed to be this kind of utility specialization. They have pretty clearly defined roles, and this is something that actually it scares me a little bit, and also doesn't scare me a little bit, because I see what they're trying to do here, but I almost view the role and the play style of something like Harbinger, for example, and honestly Virtuoso as well, as incredibly rigid, right? If you look at Harbinger, you have a power trait line, an elixir trait line, and a combi trait line. If you play all 3 of those, it's basically going to be the same, right? And your ability core is identical. Like, the traits do not actually influence your gameplay whatsoever. They're all incredibly passive, right? And in some cases, they're also incredibly similar. That you see this particularly in the Grandmaster trait, right? Like, all 3 GM traits just pulse something while you're in charge. They pulse a different thing. But gameplay wise, those things are identical. Like, all they do is change what it does, not how it does it. And this is something that is actually quite scary to me about the new elite specializations. They've been so conservative, particularly with trait design, because I think they're worried about stuff like, Infinite Horizon on Mirage, right? Or something like Feed from Corruption on Scourge. There's these absolutely terrifying monster traits that can be very game mode warping, but they made it insanely conservative. A lot of the abilities are just, you do more damage, you can use this more often, you give this boon, like you do combi damage now, right?
I feel like Willbender's the one where the traits are a little bit more like they vary your gameplay, but on 6 of the 9 traits, there's huge trade-offs that I don't know if you want to take some of those traits because of it. So it's like they vary the gameplay, but I think the trade-offs are a little bit too hard, at least on the Grandmaster traits, in my opinion.
Trade-offs on traits is really interesting. I think they kind of like double down on the trade-offs, because, if you think about it, you're playing a Harbinger, so isn't the trade-off supposed to be in the first minor, right? And I think it is. If you play Harbinger, for example, then, you have less HP basically because you get this blight mechanic the longer you're in Shroud, and you can't buff your HP with Shroud anymore. But you get a ranged weapon and you can move around a bit better, right? With the Shroud abilities. Awesome, right? And then you look at Willbender for the same thing, because that's where the real trade-offs are. So the Willbender is, you have become a Willbender, so you have basically, you're very selfish now, right? And you kind of lose a bit of your active support to an extent. Like, you are a little bit more vulnerable inherently compared to, say, a Core Guardian, Dragon Hunter, or Firebrand. But oh no, now your traits also have more trade-offs on them. I'm not entirely opposed to it, but I think it's like, isn't he already dead? Right? We already hit him with a trade-off with with actually being a Willbender. So why is it that the traits need themselves to have additional trade-offs on them as well? It's like, wait, I'm not sure if that's quite how it is, but I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? Like, I think it is in a way an interesting approach to doing it, but I think that the payoff is just so low in some of these areas that it's just not good enough, right?
I think you could leave the trade-offs on the adept traits that they have there, because they're kind of boring in a way, but also kind of interesting, like the concentration but do less boon duration to your friends, etc. But on those Grandmaster skills, at least the top one and the bottom one, I think the trade-offs are too much. Like, lose all the healing on Resolve and only get regeneration instead, and you get Alacrity. Good. It'll probably be used in some sort of playstyle eventually when the whole spec gets buffed, and maybe you'll use it for a DPS spec, for example. But the last one, I thought that last trait, the Grandmaster trait that makes you immortal for 4 seconds, would have been really, really good. But really, the loss of Aegis is very, very hard hitting on you if you want to take it. So I don't know if anybody's really going to take it because of the loss of Aegis on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny actually. A lot of people say that Willbender is super, super boring, but I actually think it's the least boring of the three in terms of its trait design, actually. And to an extent, it's mechanical design. There's actually a lot of really interesting mechanics that it has. And the traits in particular are by far the best, in my opinion. Like, particularly the Grandmaster traits, they're all very, very different with the way they operate. And honestly, a lot of the others too, right? You know, like resistance on shadow stepping, stuff like, you know, you can chain your virtues together and you kind of get a refund of the cooldown that you didn't use in that particular virtue. I think there's actually a lot of interesting stuff there. It's just that Willbender is incredibly weak and just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, everything needs to be kind of buffed a little bit on Willbender, eh? Like
for sure.
Yeah, especially, okay, my pet peeve for Willbender is Justice, is the Justice animation.
Oh, the animation lock. Oh.
Yes.
That's like
it's really bad.
The first thing I think of when I think of Willbender is just how bad that feels. And then after that, I mean, there's other little problems and stuff, but that particular problem is hurtful for me. And also not only the animation, but the fact, okay, so all your virtues are no longer passive. They no longer give you passives, right? So everything's active. And so for courage and for resolution, they kind of buff the active effect rather than what it does for a passive. But Justice, the active effect is identical to what every other Guardian's passive effect is.
Yep.
Why?
And it's also like insanely difficult. Yeah, it's like you have the passive, but not all the time. Like, surely because it's active and you can't use it at the same time as the other ones, you should have a way bigger payoff, right? But you actually don't. You have the same payoff that other Guardians have literally permanently, and they have an active component. It's like,
and it's different in PvP and PvE for the other ones, like 5 targets versus 1 target. But in PvE for Justice, it's also still 5 targets that could get traded for 3. But yeah, it's.
And the worst part about it is that if you're playing Willbender, you're almost certainly playing power, right? It has like no real condi in the entire thing, and it still gives you condi. So it's actually like useless. It's like totally useless. It's this like big engage trade-off skill, right? It's like, all right, I'm going to leap in and punch someone with my giant like dragon hand, and then the payoff is nothing, right? Like,
yeah. I have a hot take on how to fix that too.
Oh, unleash, unchain.
Are you sure? Should we wait until we? I mean, I guess. It's,
well, I mean, I think we can just go. I think let's just start with Willbender. You know, I'm changing the order, right? We're doing Willbender first. We're gonna go there. We're gonna go Willbender first. Let's do it. We're doing Willbender breakdown and analysis straight up right now.
So the F1 on Willbender, the animation lock should stay. Whoa. I think it should actually stay, but make it how the Daredevil elite functions, where you fly into somebody, you hit them and knock them up, and then it has a down punch that's a finisher on the F1.
A finisher. So you can do a finish on a 12-second cooldown F1. Okay.
Well, it's not really 12 seconds, though, because you have to... You're fighting with all the other... I mean, kind of, but you're fighting with all the other virtues. Like, what if I want to fly into combat?
You can reduce the cooldown of it because of that trait you have.
Just nerf the trait, though. Do it though. Like, leave the animation lock there, but make it do something absolutely ridiculous like that. That would be great.
That would be ridiculous. Yeah.
It would be unique. It would be a little crazy. It would fit in with the flavor really well. It's called Justice, so just. Give him some justice.
And that would work really well with the Grandmaster trait that makes you unable to be cleaved down when you use Courage. So you Courage in, and then F1, and can't be cleaved down.
Free stomp, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so sure about that one. But yeah, one thing before we kind of go into specific things with elite specs, actually, there's another thing actually that I think really cropped up and really struck me with these particular 3 elite specializations, is that one of the reasons why they feel underwhelming is because what they actually do has no place in PvE, right? And let me explain. So Virtuoso has 1200 range, right? In a world where you stack directly behind the boss's ass and do a rotation. Willbender has loads of baked-in mobility in a world where you stand behind the boss and do a rotation. And Harbinger, again, has some mobility and is a glass cannon in a world where glass cannons are actually not that valuable because, hey, people aren't jumping at the opportunity to play Weaver, are they? Right? Like, oh, wow, I can't wait to log onto my Weaver in raids. No, it turns out that the way the game plays out in the current metagame, for sure, is that you actually play like real tanky shit all the time. You're playing your Firebrand, your Renegade, your Mirage, your Scourge, right? Your Chronomancers, right? Like all this like, tank stuff. Even in PvE. And I think that's what has kind of been a bit jarring here, is that ArenaNet have made things that to an extent don't actually apply. A lot of the trade-offs feel like you're trading something off for absolutely nothing, or basically just the exact same thing in the case of Virtuoso, because what it actually brings to the table is like totally irrelevant in a PvE context. And then because it's lackluster in the other game modes, it feels bad.
I agree with you entirely for like high-level PvE, for raids or fractals or stuff like that. I think you are right. But for just general PvE, like I would love to play Willbender, to like fly around there, hitting a bunch of different things, getting away from things. Sounds like a fun playstyle. Same thing, Virtuoso. I'm still wishy-washy on Virtuoso altogether. I don't know if I really like it that much. But yeah, so that and Harbinger. I mean, Harbinger's amazing in general PvE. I love it. But I think you're right. You're right that those playstyles don't really fit into high-level PvE content. The what's out there to be killed right now. Yeah. Like if there was bosses or like multi-mob bosses that you have to get between them really quickly, Willbender would probably be good for that, but that doesn't exist really.
Dungeon solos.
Dungeon solos, yeah, great for dungeon
solos. It's amazing for dungeon solos. That's all I did with it.
Yeah.
I did dungeon. Yeah. A raw soloing on Willbender. If Willbender came out in 2013, no one would have played anything else. It would only have been Willbender. No one would have ever played Thief. It's really good for that. It's really cool. But dungeons are dead.
ArenaNet, they're hinting at something. It is confirmed. We are bringing back dungeons. There you go. To go with Willbender. Willbender will have that content. And it is true, guys, that it's not just, instance PvE. But the fact of the matter is that, look, don't kid yourself. What do you do in open world PvE? In open world PvE, you run around as a giant blob, right? Like that is what you do in that game mode as well. Let's not pretend. I'm of course aware of like the other stuff there as well, like the open world bosses and stuff like that. But realistically, the way most PvE in Guild Wars 2 goes, mobility and range are not actually that relevant because even if you're doing an open world boss or open world PvE, you're going to be in a fairly large group, stacked up, right, and tickling the dragon, right? Like that sounds like something a little bit more inappropriate, but it really isn't. That is what you're doing, guys. Polishing the nails of the dragon is what's going on.
That one Hydra in Crystal Desert that you have to chase down. Hey, Willbender would be great for that.
That's true. Yeah, now you can really keep up. You can keep up there and go that big speed, right? Okay, Willbender is really cool, but really bad. That's honestly a really good way of putting it, I think. It's very cool, but very bad, right? That is essentially my overall thoughts on Willbender. But now let's kind of get into it. On that note, let's talk about Willbender a little bit in a bit more depth. And like what we like about it, what we don't like about it, and what needs to go in that direction. So I think actually I think I'll let Brazil start because you did some stuff in dungeons there, right? With Willbender. Like, how do you feel about Willbender overall in its current state with regards to, and what do you think it needs and what do you think is good about it? What's bad about it? Outside of F1 not being a stomp.
I think it needs to do more damage. I was kind of like sneaking around and being sneaky in the Snowcrow's Discord, and the damage is comparative to DH right now, but a raw soloing on DH, you don't have to even think about it because you have negation for every single mechanic that anything does. The first boss in a Raw Path 2 was really, really stressful for like 2 days for me. I wiped on that boss a lot, and I have not wiped on that boss in a long time because I've only played Thief or DH on it. But you don't have the like super leap that full heals you basically. You don't have the Aegis block and a shield that lasts for 15 seconds On Firebrand, you don't even die anyways because you can just Aegis and heal so much, it doesn't matter. But on this one, you don't really have that. And also the heal skill wasn't really doing anything. I tried the heal skill, but it didn't seem to do anything at all. I don't know why. Like, I would get hit, it wouldn't proc, or it wouldn't do anything. It was kind of weird. But Litany of Wrath is just the best heal skill anyways for Guardian, so just play that. But it was difficult. You have to be in really close to stuff. You have to melee. Your traits make you less durable. Like, if you're playing the one that gives you reduced toughness but more power, you get hit really hard and you die really fast. You already have a low HP pool. But it's really cool because from like dungeons are all about routing and getting from place to place as fast as possible. The bosses are just kind of roadblocks. So moving around through the dungeon was awesome. It was so cool to have access to leaps and rushes and stuff. Some of the animations are a little bit clunky because you just kind of like super speed forward really fast and then you stop, and it's just kind of weird to look at. But it was really, really cool for that. And like, I really do mean it. Like, it's probably, Guardian has been my main for a long time, and Necromancer has been here and there. Like, I've gotten really excited about Necromancer and Burst. But the best way that I could probably think to put this is Willbender is the class that I've always wanted. I've always wanted something to do that. A Guardian that was super mobile and was just like all in melee. But I'll probably never play it because Dragon Hunter makes everything easier and it's just way too good. And it's really sad because I want to play Willbender. Willbender is amazing. I absolutely love how it works and how it plays and what it offers, but there's not really a reason to play it when DH is brain dead and does like the same or more damage, and Firebrand is just way too good.
Would your current dungeon meta, though, be Willbender to get places and then swap to DH when you fight things?
Yeah, pretty much. It absolutely would be. Just buy more build templates. You already know how I feel about that. That's honestly, if you're a hardcore dungeon soloer, that's what you're going to do right now. Like, if Willbender came out in the state it is, you're going to Willbender template to run from boss to boss. On power bosses, you'll DH template, and on bosses that you need Condi for, you'll just Firebrand template. That's how you would play it. Which, I mean, that's kind of like the meta, I guess, if you wanted to call it. It may be build template, but it kind of sucks that you have a spec that's just for running around. When Daredevil already does like power damage and mobility. Sorry, Teapot.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, on that note, like in that case, do you think problems like this could, to be an extent, be solved by actually changing the way certain content is designed? What if you have bosses that actually require a bit more mobility? Because we're talking about the fact that, you just swap off when you get to the fight. Well, what if you can't swap off when you get to the fight because you need to be mobile in the fight or something like this? This is something that I was, I've been leaning towards for a long time. I think there's actually, the new Elite Specializations to me actually highlight a flaw in the actual content in the game, not necessarily with the new Specializations. It's true that a lot of the things don't generate you any value, but then why not make content where it actually is value to have this kind of stuff.
If Veil Guardian, the green circles activated a lot faster, for example, Willbender would probably be good for that.
Or you couldn't ignore them.
Yeah, exactly.
Or anything like that. Or the boss moves a lot, for example, right? If the boss is moving around a lot, then you have to keep up with it. And then having some mobility built into your kit is going to be extremely valuable. Or being range in that same vein. If the boss is moving around a lot, being range is pretty good. Being mobile is also pretty good there if you're a melee. I think that sort of thing is actually a really good way to fix this. Because I look at Willbender and I don't look at anything. I don't look at it and go like, right, this is actually, a badly designed spec. I don't think it is. I think it's actually a really well-designed spec. There's a few issues here and there with animation locking, and just the numbers aren't really that good. The payoff isn't great on some of the trade-offs and some of the way the virtues work. But on the face of it, I go like, this is actually a really interesting, a very different way of playing Guardian. It's just that what it doesn't actually do anything, right? That goes with that's a different story in PvP, because I think eventually it will be able to shine in PvP pretty well as soon as it, right now all the mobility on Willbender is just like a shortcut to like your own base. You just like go there and like respawn, like you just feed, respawn, and then go back in and then reset, run around in circles dying. But I think it can actually be really good. I think I could imagine encounters where something like Willbender could actually be really strong and incredibly effective. So I don't want them to actually change the design, if that makes any sense. I want them to stay with the design, but just make it more workable and make it more applicable in the game by creating stuff where it's good.
I agree with you. I think, though, that it's possible, and it brings us to that old discussion of, do elite specs have to be good in every game mode, right? So I think Willbender is supposed to be a PvP competitive spec, right? It's supposed to be PvP world versus world the way it looks right now. And obviously you could play in PvE and get around a little bit, but it doesn't look like it's meant to be for raids and fractals. And is that a bad thing? I don't know if it's a bad thing. Sure, you could make new raids and fractals that are designed to make Willbender shine, but is that really necessary?
Well, you know what? I actually say yes. It's a little bit of a tangent here.
Yeah.
But it's really got my head scratching here. I think it's really stupid. Not really stupid. I think it's really weird, rather, that raids and fractals don't use certain parts of the Guild Wars 2 combat system. Like, why, if this is, the pinnacle of PvE, right? This is like the ultimate PvE challenge, raids and, raids, fractals, bosses, strike missions, right? This, like, proper endgame stuff. Why is it that it flat out ignores, huge portions of the combat system? Like, for example, I think the other example of this would be Spellbreaker, right? I think everyone looked at Spellbreaker and was like, oh, this is a PvP spec, right? It's a PvP spec. Why? Right? Why is it that the players, we're incredibly boon-centric, and boons are incredibly important to the way we play the game, but it's irrelevant to the way bosses play the game? And the same thing with mobility. The Guild Wars 2 combat system, one of the things that it really gets a lot of praise for, right? Whenever you say, oh, wow, the combat in Guild Wars 2 it's so fluid, it's so mobile, right? You can move while casting, right? When do you move while casting, like in a raid? Like in the ideal situation, you literally stand behind the boss and just don't move. Like you just never press the WASD key. Like, oh, the boss moved out of my AoE field. My rotation's ruined. Like this is actually a huge flaw with the design in PvE. And I think that, I don't know, that's not like some kind of like giga brain revelation. If you think about it, it's been staring us in the face. But I think it's really come to light now that we see the new elite specializations, because they do interesting things that just don't provide value in the current content.
So you're saying, content should, what are the things that's missing then? We need content that rewards mobility, I guess. Content that, I guess you'd have to have bosses that have boons that need to be removed or need to be interrupted, like have a break bar that activates every 5 seconds or something, and if you don't break it down every time you die. Is that what we're thinking about?
I think the way you implement this is a lot softer, right? It's a bit like no pain, no gain in fractals. I'm not sure how popular it is. Maybe everyone hates no pain, no gain, but no pain, no gain is just for context here. Is stuff gets boons. It gets prot, fury, and might in fractals periodically, and you want to remove it. Can you still do the fractal without boon rip? Yeah, sure, you absolutely can, right? But does it make it easier if you remove the boons? Absolutely. And I kind of want the same thing here. It's like, is it impossible without removing the boons? No. You want it to be like a soft benefit so that it provides some value but doesn't dominate. I mean, a bit like Confusion, right? Like, Confusion has actually had a really big problem with this because it was so polarizing. I don't want it to be that polarizing where if you don't bring boon, you're going to lose. It's kind of where Confusion is right now, where it's really nice if you have it on bosses that attack fast, but if you don't, it's whatever, right? You can do Largos without stacking Mirages. You know what I mean? But hey, if you have a bunch.
Boss. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think I have to challenge you a little bit, Teapot.
Oh.
When you say the bosses just sit there and stand still, effectively that's what they're reduced to, because you could deal damage so fast and you could ignore mechanics. The mechanics just aren't punishing enough. So Veil Guardian, the whole mechanic is that you have to run out to green circles, prevent the group from wiping, run back into the boss, and you run around the arena in a circle chasing after it. But then people figured out you don't have to do greens, and then people figured out that you can just stack in the same place. Like, there's the mid strat for the last phase even. The last phase is the one where you arguably have to move the most. You can just stand in the middle of the arena and barely move at all, and you can just kill it. So like effectively the boss doesn't ever move and you just stack on it because the mechanics just aren't punishing for probably the amount of power creep is in the game. Gorseval, the same thing too. Gorseval, the mechanic is to pull it to the edge of the arena, break down the wall, jump off, glide, and then go back and fight it. And so you need a little bit of mobility for that fight. But people realize you could just out damage it. Slothosaur moves around. You have to move it around the arena in there, but you can just out damage it, get it to the CC bar, and then stack stability or traits that stun break everyone. And you don't have to worry about it. You can just stand still. And there, Matthias is the same way. You have encounters where there's mobility and moving built into the fight, but it just doesn't matter because you can ignore all of it.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I mean, in that case, I think we're just talking about, in a way, the degree of the problem rather than the category of the problem, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And hey, you never know, right? Veil Guardian CM, maybe it just one-shots you. Maybe you just die instantly if you miss it, right? Let's go. And no, I completely agree. I think that's a very fair counter and a very fair assessment of the situation. Yeah, like the big problem is that mechanics simply just don't do anything. Or you can just break them with other mechanics, right? You can break them with barrier or with healing or with boons, right? Or whatever. You can just break the encounter. And I think that is certainly the case. A lot of the times Guild Wars 2 PvE, it ends up feeling a little bit like Solitaire, where you just kind of like, oh, we've got 25 might, we've assembled Exodia, right? Every boon in the game. Good luck, boss. Kind of reminds me of, I think the boss that really exemplifies this is actually Samurog, right? Samurog is the saddest boss. If you actually had, like, least happy bosses in Guild Wars 2 tier list, right at the top would be Samurog, because you have so much Aegis and stability that Samurog literally does nothing. Like, Samurog just sits there, can't win, right? Actually impossible to lose, right? You just ignore every mechanic and it doesn't do anything. It's quite sad.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, what you're saying would be great if there are some encounters, at least in the game, that reward every type of playstyle in PvE as well as in PvP. And maybe eventually we'll get something like that. Like maybe eventually we'll get a strike mission where it's like you need to bring a spellbreaker or else you're not going to be able to do this. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but if we go back to Willbender in specifics, I still am of the opinion that it doesn't matter. There can exist specs, elite specs, that work only in certain game modes and not in all game modes.
Oh, I agree. And I would even say that in certain cases, it is absolutely essential for this to be the case. For example, Kala should never be good in PvP. Right, not Renegade specifically, but to kind of even make it more granular, I would say there are certain mechanics that inherently should not be good in certain game modes. Right, for example, Scourge shouldn't be good in PvP. Right, I don't know why I need to keep saying this. I argued with my chat a lot about this stuff. Scourge shouldn't be good. Right, Mirage probably shouldn't be good either, to be perfectly honest with you. Right, but I'll allow Mirage to live because I have to say it does make games quite exciting, right? So
please
Mirage,
agree that Minion Master should not be a good thing in PvP.
I agree.
Please.
Yeah,
okay.
Minion Master should absolutely not be a thing in PvP rather. Like it can be great in PvE. In fact, it should be, dude. Where's the Minion Reaper build? Okay, Brazil, me and Brazil, we love that build. Why is it not here? Why do we not have our infinite minion lich form necro build again?
I loved it. Oh, I loved it.
Tragedy, absolute sadness. Okay, you hate to see it. But yeah, no, this is I would definitely agree with this. You don't have to have everything good, but I think that Willbender definitely could be. And in a way, like what I'm asking for here is, hey, funny enough, I think Willbender would be a great candidate to have boon rip actually, seeing as it's the opposite of Guardian, right? Like Guardian's all about giving boons. Well, hey, maybe make it so this one removes boons. You could even
puts them on himself.
Yeah. Oh, steel boons. Boom. I like it. There it is. Yeah. Like what I'm kind of getting at here is I think there's almost like untreaded territory in PvE. Like right now our roles are DPS and support broadly. And then support is very diverse in Guild Wars, right? You do damage or you provide some kind of support. So you're healing or you're giving boons or you're tanking or something. Like you're performing some kind of utility role. Now, what I think is that why do we not have more in your instance PvE? Like, why not also have boon manipulator, for example? Like something that can manipulate boons in some way. You can also have actual utility become a lot more potent in raids, like stuff like being able to go really fast or having loads of range, right? So you, instead of having just DPS, you actually becomes a lot more defined into melee DPS and range DPS. And then you can design encounters that slightly favor or slightly disfavor certain mechanics and will, in a way, kind of require it, but not fully require it. I think ArenaNet don't like the idea of like being locked out unless you have a certain thing. Right, I think that's not really what they want to do, and I would agree with that philosophy. But I think you can definitely nudge people in the direction by designing the encounters and designing stuff such that it plays more like this. You know, I think it really demonstrates that Guild Wars 2 was always designed to be a PvP game, because I think the ideal Guild Wars 2 raid boss is as close to PvP as possible. Right, so you are, you know, actually battling this foe, and it knows the mechanics of the game. Right now, it feels like a lot of bosses just don't understand Guild Wars 2. They need to watch my tutorial series and how the combat system works, because they don't dodge, they don't even try and like remove your boons or anything like that. They just sit there and take it. And you know, I think it's time to stop.
How amazing would it be to have a strike mission boss that's a revenant that kites and has like that? You know how revenants have that multiplicative stacking of stuff. So if they have resolution and protection, they take no damage, and you have to rip it off. Otherwise, they take no damage. That would be boss fight.
What if I told you that there's like already AI that does this in the game, but you probably just don't know about it?
Oh,
there's AI. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say. I mean, are you talking about some of the videos that were there? Because they actually do have this. Yeah. I am aware of this. Yeah, they actually have the ability to do this, but didn't they turn it off in beta? Or are you saying that this actually isn't actually literally in the game?
It's been in the game since launch. So in dungeons, any of the enemies that are classified as rangers, if anyone in the group clicks on them and has them targeted, they will evade backwards and like immobilize you or get distortion or do stuff to counter and get away from you. Some of them evade. Like some of them literally will dodge roll. The what is it? The Wraith Lord's Hunter in Arapath 3, it will dodge backwards and put down a spike trap. And so if you try to move towards it, it will immobilize you and it'll bleed you and it will move away from you. If you click on it, like if you highlight it, all of the ranger enemies do that, aside from the Risen Rangers or the Risen Hunters or whatever they're called, just the basic ones. But in Caudicus's Manor, the Rangers do that. Like in Twilight Arbor, they all do that. So they have tech for that. But you awesome. don't see it anywhere. Like it's not on a raid boss.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are any of the bots in PvP programmed well enough to do things that are good in game?
You know, funny enough, they actually program them deliberately badly, so otherwise they get too high rating. That is like the saddest thing ever. Like bots in PvP, they run deliberately bad builds and are deliberately bad at the game, because if they actually program them to be good, their rating would get too high and they'd be suspicious. Like,
that's Irish Johansson.
Yeah, it's. That is Guild Wars 2 PvP in a nutshell. The bots have to limit themselves, otherwise they're too powerful. They just start farming everyone. Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some things like this, but I think that, you know, it's weird that doesn't really. I guess it would be maybe a little bit annoying, but I don't know. Would it be annoying? I'm not sure it would be that annoying if the bosses played into the combat system. I'm not saying they should be like actually dodging all over the place and like teleporting like a thief. I'm not saying that Doom should have the same level of mobility. You know,
it should
as Willbender. You know.
It definitely should.
I think there's a bit more that we could do, because that's really the core issue with stuff like Willbender, I think, like outside of the numbers. Because even if they give it numbers, where does Willbender end up? Like, Willbender is basically going to be Dragon Hunter, except it doesn't have a really big block and it can't do an AoE heal. Like, that is basically what Willbender is going to end up as. If they just make it do more damage. And I guess maybe it will just do more damage than Dragon Hunter, I guess, to compensate for having zero utility. But again, that isn't desirable to the broad majority of the player base. There's a very good reason why a lot of people play DH, play these like slightly tankier things, because it allows you to carry yourself and carry the group. And that is a little bit sad. But I mean, yeah, obviously, I mean, maybe it will just end up being really good in PvP. But, you know,
let's talk about PvP Willbender then. Let's talk about what it needs to be better than it currently is.
Oh, you know what? this is where the big takes come in here. To be honest, what Willbender needs is a little bit more numbers, a little bigger numbers. But you know what it really needs? You know, the real, and the F1 needs to be, this is like the new Mace pistol thing, okay? Which, unlucky, Brazil. Unlucky, dude, okay? Maybe they can load something else into a pistol, but it's not going to be a Mace, unfortunately. But anyway, never mind that. I think that it actually just needs Path of Fire to get nerfed a lot. Right now, it gets bullied so hard by everything that exists in the meta.
But it gets bullied by core specs, too, sometimes.
Well, I mean, when I say POF, I'm okay. I should be more specific. You're right. I should be more specific. When I say Path of Fire, I mean Path of Fire specializations and all of the power creep across the entire board that Path of Fire brought with it. Because yeah, it's not just Path of Fire specs that got power crept. You know, Reaper has literally permanent quickness while it's in Shroud now. You know, Core Guard is a better support than Firebrand, right? You know, like all these things got a lot better over time with Path of Fire because they were like, okay. Path of Fire, pretty good. Let's go ahead and bring everything up to that level. Let's buff up these core specs. Let's buff up Heart of Thorns a little bit to push it to that level. But I think all of it needs to come down here a little bit because I think there's a happy medium to be had here. I'm not saying that everything should be as bad as Willbender. Although, having said that, it wouldn't be so bad, I don't think, actually, if everything was that weak. But I think Willbender needs to go up. Everything else that needs to come down to kind of meet these new elite specializations because they're in PvP. In my opinion, they're all in the same boat, except maybe Harbinger. Harbinger is the one that is actually pretty juicy because it does a lot of damage, to be honest, and is still quite tanky, as it turns out, relatively speaking anyway. But I don't know, even about that one, I'm skeptical. I think you're going to get ripped to shreds playing against a coordinated team. Like right now, everyone's scared of you. They don't go anywhere near you. If you play Harbinger, no one focuses you. But I don't know, as soon as people realize that, oh, he's got no shroud, he's literally a free kill, like hold W on him until he dies, I don't know, it's going to get farmed. But yeah, that's my take on Harbinger there.
I think, okay, so if we're still talking about Willbender, though, like besides nerfing everything else and buffing Willbender, what specifically on Willbender would we change to make it better?
I would probably look at the I would look at the virtues and give it a much bigger payoff.
Yeah,
is the key here. Like I think the mechanic, it's not bad design, but there is just no payoff. Like you're playing this as some kind of roamer, essentially, right? That's what you are. You're a roamer of sorts. So what's the actual payoff from all of your virtues? Like every 5 attacks, you get an Aegis and a stack of stab on
too
F3.
High in PvP,
right?
For
like,
sure.
You're not getting that. Like, yeah, sure. Like in PvE, you can get value out of that in a really big cleave situation. But in PvP, you're not getting that. Like you don't have perma quickness. You're not going to be spamming a million AoEs that every mob's going to stand there. It's just not going to happen, right? And it's the same across the board. I think that in PvP they should trigger way more often. I think the Justice F1 should be changed in its functionality, probably to the point where it does something like it does power damage, a bit like Impossible Odds or something like that. Instead of doing Condi, it's just different, like the way it operates. I think the
and
F3...
how would you rework the Virtue Grandmaster for it?
It gives you double hit, double strike.
Well, I actually don't mind the Justice one because the Justice one, right? It does it gives you just, doesn't the Justice one give you more damage? That's what it does, right? It makes Justice longer and then makes it so that the modifier is better from the minor trait.
No, I'm talking about Virtue Grandmaster.
Oh, you mean Permeating Wrath? Oh yeah. To be honest, I actually think that those should be a bit like Virtuoso Sword 3. So for context, Virtuoso Sword 3 just works very, very differently with Virtuoso than anything else because you don't have clones anymore. So you just like have a basic leap. I think, yeah, stuff like Permeating Wrath should either just do the same thing. Yeah, you get AoE burn on it as well, right? In addition to the power damage. Okay. Or it should do something slightly different with the way it works. Because, I mean, have you seen what happens with Battle Presence? Because this really confused me. I was like, what the fuck does that actually do? Because Battle Presence shares the passive, right, of F2. Right. But you don't have a passive F2. But you know what it does? It gives you the base virtue to everyone else except you. Right? It's a very weird interaction. Right? Genuinely bizarre.
I would have expected that it would have shared the active, right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't
do that.
Yeah,
it dashes. Everyone dashes forward.
No, I mean like everybody when you're hitting things in a group and healing yourself from it, that would be shared to your friends.
It gives everyone alacrity.
Yeah,
that would have been nice.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought it was gonna do. But it doesn't do
It
that.
doesn't do that.
Yeah, it
Okay.
just gives you the passive. It's super weird, right?
That is weird.
With the way that works. Yeah, so it's very, very unusual. But yeah, I
It's
think that
also
it's
weird.
always going to be a bit weird because if you think about it, like Virtues is very clearly a trait line that is almost like based around the idea of having passives, right? Like it's very much like, oh yeah, this is supposed to have passives, right?
Yeah.
But then you just don't, right? It's very fundamentally different from base Guardian. So I think you have to have a little bit of wiggle on how these kind of work to a certain extent.
Was also well, it feels like that was just an oversight. It feels like they didn't rework that trait at all. Like it's not built into what your Guardian does, right? You know, like you switch to Willbender, it still does the same thing because they didn't actually change the way the trait works at all. It just does the same thing because they didn't actually look back at it when making the thing. I think there's a lot of little things on Willbender that don't make that much sense. Like the adept trait that gives you extra concentration but less to your allies. But then there's no real boons that you would want concentration for in the entire trait line.
Well, I think that's kind of just aimed at the fact that you'll still have a lot built in. You know, symbols are going to give you boons. If you take the Virtues trait line, which is pretty
Yeah, but
likely,
those you want to be shared to your allies.
Well, yeah, but I think the idea is that you want them to be shared, but Willbender shouldn't do that, right? If that makes any sense, right? Like, so yeah, you know, it's the trade-off. They're supposed to be trade-off traits, so it's supposed to be an inherently selfish spec, and they're trying to counteract the fact that Guardian is at its core a non-selfish spec, right? It's very built in, right? That it isn't selfish, and they
I just feel like there should be
it.
more boons on the traits or the skills to make that worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there should be definitely bigger payoffs there. I mean, you do have the resistance that you get and the extra prot and resolution on the next one. Yeah, that one is actually I really like that trait. This is one thing I really praise about Willbender is that I think the trait design is very strong. Like overall, there's quite a lot of interesting traits there that do some fun stuff. But I think they just need to probably do a little bit more. I think the adept ones in particular. For example, you could make the one that I mean, this would be really weird, but you can make like the damagey one, make it so that Justice also like removes a boon when you proc it or something like that. So you have like a bit of boon rip on it.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, like boon stealing. If we put boon stealing into the Willbender line, then that adept trait makes a lot more sense.
Oh, that would be cool. Actually, you could put that on the concentration one. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so you could make it so like your Justice, like F1 steals boons from the targets or something like that. I think that would also really go well with the kind of Roma playstyle because one of the really good things about stuff like Herald, right? Stuff like Thief in PvP is that you have this like quite potent boon steal capacity, right? Where with Herald, you have the Shiro F2 to like, do a big spike of damage and remove some boons from targets. With Thief, you have Steal, right? Or maybe even, you know, in the more extreme case, if you're playing Sword Dagger, you have Larcenous Strike where you steal boons from the target. I think moving Willbender into having a bit more to it than just running around really quickly and hitting things, I think would really help it fulfill its role a little bit better, right? Because right now it is a bit, you know, it's you know, it's all glass and no cannon, you know, like there's a
So someone says Willbender really needs quickness access. I feel that way when I'm playing it, but I think that's only because the animations are slower than they should be. I feel like if the animations were tidied up a little bit and it felt a little bit more mobile, a little bit more like fluid, then you wouldn't need the quickness necessarily built into it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think if a spec feels like it needs quickness, I would say that you just need to look at the way the abilities actually work. Right, you know, the F1 like animation is just horrible. It's like way too long and way too clunky. Stuff like Sword. Maybe Sword's is a little bit too slow. Or maybe the radius on these abilities is just a bit too slow. For example, if you look at something like you know, the Sword abilities like 4 and 5, that you have to be like right on the target to connect them, you know, like literally like right there. And if the enemy moves away 1 centimeter, unfucking lucky, buddy, right? Your ability didn't do anything. So I think if you maybe change the approach there and maybe give them a bit more reach, a little bit more of an AoE in a way, you can remove a certain level of this clunkiness that a lot of the abilities actually have like kind of baked into the way they work there to change the is. Because I am a little bit scared of having a lot of quickness on builds. I think quickness is a very scary boon. It's a terrifying boon, and overloading with it, I think, is a little bit too much.
We can talk about Harbinger later then.
Yeah. Oh, no. Like, oh, no. Yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, you could give it quickness. I wouldn't be upset with that. Give it quickness and alacrity, but you can't share it.
And
like
a
the
stomp.
ultimate troll and a stomp. Yeah, the F1 is now dude. Just make it so if you hit someone in the down state with the elite, boom, stomps them, and it's AOE too. AOE stomp.
Holy
Dude,
shit!
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
There we go. At least, yes. I see. I love this. I love where this is going.
With a 25-second cooldown, by the way, in PvP.
Yeah, people have already clicked off the video because I say like too much and because I suggested the stomp in the first place. So it's okay. We'll just go crazy now.
I like it. Yeah, it's time to unchain. And funny enough, actually, like this is a very weird aside, but it's something that I really want to bring up here. Do you guys feel that elite specs should have a trait that influences their new ability type? Because I really think they should. Right? This, whenever I go, like, oh, I'm sad because like Harbinger, nice AOE elixirs, share every boon in the game, love to see it, right? But then I look at Virtuoso with all these cool like psionic abilities where you're firing out laser beams and shit. Like, whoa, it's pretty cool. You know, the animations are insane, right? You know, you're firing swords out the sky, love to see it, but you have no trait for it. It's like, oh, well, okay then. And it's the same thing with Willbender, right? Like I felt there could be like a physical trait for Willbender that makes it do something or like interact some way, right? That would be super cool, I think.
I assume that they're going to come out with physical runes now when the thing comes out because they usually do that. Something like that.
Yeah.
So they'll come up with physical runes now. Warrior's going to have some interesting runes to play with, possibly.
There'll be condition damage. The physical runes.
Yeah. But that's how you get your condition damage on your Willbender. But no, I agree with you. I think there's got to be at least one trait that does something to physical skills in the trait line.
Yeah. What would you drop though? Like, what would you kill? Because they're all rather interesting, actually. Would you maybe get rid of the Willbender Flames one? No, there has to be a trait that interacts with Willbender Flames as well, right? Maybe a Grandmaster trait that does something with
what's the middle major one?
Your Willbender Flames deal a bit more damage, and it heals you. The flames heal you when they proc.
Okay.
You think kill it? Just delete it, or maybe merge it. Maybe throw physicals on top of it or something.
Yeah,
maybe physicals make Willbender Flames.
Oh,
could be kind of interesting.
I like that. Yeah,
I like that a lot. Yeah,
it'll be the three that stick out like the claw, like the F1 does.
Yeah, something like that. Or they could even have different patterns too, or like they could each have one that's related to a virtue in some way.
It could be a pentagram, the full opposite of Guardian.
Oh,
unholy Guardian. Unholy Paladin spec. Easy.
Well, that's kind of what I thought this is going to be. And when I saw the double sword, I was like, dude, this is actually going to be, this is going to be like the Dark Paladin, right? The full Valen roleplay Dark Paladin spec. But I guess they kept it a bit more in line with Guardian's overall theme, which I think makes sense to an extent, right? I think that, they don't want to like make a spec completely separate from the thematic elements of a profession. It would be weird if Guardian was like all of a sudden like it was just shopping and Hot Topic all the time, right? It would be a bit unusual if you went in that direction. So I guess it makes sense, but I think they could definitely put some more like more like slightly dark, unholy elements in there as well. Like particularly, I think Boon Rip would be good. Like my Drew would be like corruption or stealing. I think it'd be super sick because maybe this is very intentional by ArenaNet, but why is it that Necro is the only spec that can corrupt boons? Right? I think yes.
Because of lore.
Well. But why is
it shouldn't be? You're right. It shouldn't.
Yeah,
be.
Like I feel like that doesn't quite make sense, right? Like boon corruption, and in theory, I feel like a Mesmer could corrupt boons too. Yeah, yeah.
That's because he's basically channeling a necromancer.
Yeah, Malix. Yeah.
Well, Renegade. Renegade corrupts boons. It strips, doesn't it? It doesn't like corrupt.
Oh, and it transfers boons, but yeah, I don't think it corrupts.
Yeah. Malix obviously has the ability to remove boons, but I think it's good. I think if Banish Enchantment corrupted boons, I mean, no one would ever have fun in this game ever again. But yeah, no,
it's like a 3-second cooldown. Right?
Yeah. But no, guys, I'm not talking about boons. I'm talking about specifically corrupt, right? Specifically corrupt. But I don't think it actually. I don't see why Necro should have exclusivity on boon corruption. Because as long as Necro has exclusivity on boon corruption, to an extent, it's going to have this very, very powerful niche that it will always have just on one profession. I don't think that's necessarily good. I think you can have. I think you can have it a little bit. You can have like boon removal. Actually, wait, doesn't Deadeye have boon corruption? Is it a corrupt or a steal? It might be corrupt actually on Deadeye. There's one
Which
ability
one?
that I think corrupts boons, right? Well, or did they remove
Which one is it?
Oh man, no,
Was it one of the
can't
cantrips?
I
Finding
can't
Shadow
remember.
Footprints.
Hang on, wait. I could have sworn there was like one of the attacks that actually corrupts boons on Thief. Hang on, let me. Oh no, there
You
isn't.
think is it one of the steal skills maybe?
I thought it was one of the stealth skills actually that did it. Like one of the shots.
Oh,
Yeah, like the on rifle. I think did it.
Oh,
But maybe it doesn't,
Finding-
or maybe I'm just an idiot.
maybe
That's
it
a
did. I don't.
possibility.
no,
know.
Teapot, you're not an idiot.
Oh yeah, I was right.
Probably.
Yeah, see, I was right. The stealth attack used to corrupt boons on Death's Judgment. Boom.
There you go.
See,
There you go.
Grimjack backs
Used to,
me up
used to.
with the encyclopedia knowledge. Yeah, used to. Yeah. It used to. I could have sworn it used to do that, but yeah, they got rid of it. Unfucking.
Yeah.
Oh well.
So I think okay. So the interesting thing is, yeah, Edgelord Willbender would be really cool. Corrupt boons as its condition spec side. You know, like if you're gonna give condition options to Willbender, it's the corruption, and then you could keep your burning on F1. So boon rip, maybe steal, and also corrupt boons. I don't know if you stack all three of them on there. That'd be a little bit too much. Maybe you choose one of them, corrupt or steal.
Well, I think that could be interesting, right? You know, you could I mean, I think making the decision between those two would actually be like a super interesting choice, right? If you had, say, a choice where you can either have like a boon corruption trait and a boon steal trait, so you can have one of those two. I think at that point, though, I think you might not want to do that, because then you have two traits occupying the same design space, right? And I'm not
Exactly.
sure that's something that you want to do because, well, I mean, this is, we'll talk about this a little bit later, I guess. And honestly, I think we talked about Willbender a fair bit. We can honestly segue into Harbinger right now, actually.
We should, but I just have one more thing about Willbender I want to ask you guys.
Let's go. Do it.
So, Willbender is basically a guardian trying to be a thief, right?
Kind of. Yes.
Kind of.
It is supposed to be the new thief. Blue thief.
Blue thief.
It's a thief that has changed its ways. It doesn't want to break the law anymore.
Exactly.
But it still has
it
the
wants to
skill set.
enforce the law.
Yeah.
So the question is, does it need to be more powerful damage-wise or healing-wise than a thief because it doesn't have stealth?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. So that's how
both.
they have to balance it. Rather than being equal to thief without stealth, they have to be better than thief.
It
with
should
the
just
stealth.
do more damage all around every game mode.
I think it is a bit more complicated than a flat out yes. It probably still should have the advantage in terms of tankiness and sustain over Thief. Just because, again, stealth is a super good mechanic for Aroma, obviously. You can surprise people. You can it's harder to track you and see where you are, right? Whereas a Willbender, you're not going to have that issue necessarily. But it is worth noting that Shadow Arts is very problematic right now in this regard. Like, Thief is pretty much the hardest thing to kill in a competitive game mode by far, right? And that's because of Shadow Arts existing and allowing you to be in stealth for an extremely long period of time. If Thief stealth was a bit shorter, right, and Shadow Arts wasn't played and you played, say, Deadly Arts instead, then I think it would be less of a super defining swingy factor in Thief's survivability. And, you combine that with Daredevil and you just got something that is never going to die, right? Like with the mobility, the stealth, it's just very hard to kill because of Shadow Arts. So I think, yeah, stealth is definitely a really big strength of Thief, but it's magnified and amplified out of proportion by just how good the Shadow Arts trait line is.
The rune, the physical rune is when you complete a physical attack, gain stealth.
No.
Yes.
No. We do not want that.
Thief has. Oh yeah, shit. Thief has. Oh boy.
Yeah, Thief has physicals as well.
Skills. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
If you ever want to know why Shadow Arts is a bad idea, just why the trait line is so broken, you can watch Renji play. Renji is a literally zero skill player, and he farms people on Deadeye because of Shadow Arts.
Zero skill. That's a little harsh.
Zero skill.
Okay. I'll have you know, Renji beat Darkbringer 1v1, right? 1v1. Just like mash 2, double tapped him to death. It was crazy. It was insane. Annihilation in the 1v1 there. One of the most powerful gamers ever to have existed in Guild Wars 2. But yeah, so on that note,
move to Harbinger.
Yeah, Harbinger. So I almost want to leap directly into the traits here, actually, because we were just talking about how you don't want to have traits overlapping the same design space. Well, yeah, that is basically Harbinger's trait lines in a nutshell. Like the Grandmaster traits are literally the same trait that does like something slightly differently. Like you does power, condi, or gives quickness. The top trait line is power. The bottom trait line is condi, but it's both very, very straightforward DPS. And then the only thing that has any kind of variation is the poor old middle trait line. So yeah, like Harbinger, I think is amazing design-wise. It's so much fun to play, by the way, in every game. It's honestly so good. It is a joy, a genuine joy to play. The rotation is fun and fluid in PvE. You can provide a lot of value to your team. In PvP, it's so different to Core or Reaper. You're kind of dipping in and out everywhere, like leaping in there and spiking people. You got to watch your HP bar. It's honestly amazing. I really like it. It's
a little bit like the Hollowsmith mechanics a little bit.
A bit, yeah.
In PvP, yeah.
You don't want to heat up too much, right? It's a really fun playstyle. But I've got to say, the trait design is where it falls flat on its face. Because the trait design, and in particular, the interaction with the traits, the profession mechanic, and elixirs, I think is where it all falls apart. Like you've got 3 parts of it: mechanic, and then elixirs and traits. I guess weapon too. But, the weapon's kind of cool. But, you have those 3 things, and I just don't see them interacting with each other enough, right? There are a few things that do this, like the Condi trait that means that your second skill in Shroud gives poison. I think that's a pretty cool interaction. But outside of that, like everything is very like, oh, I guess I'll do some more damage, or oh, I guess I'll pulse an effect. And that is like for me where Harbinger really, really falls down and is lacking. There you go.
Yeah. I think there are some traits that definitely shine. Not shine. What's the right word for this? Like
stand out?
Scream at you as things that you really should look at, like the middle Grandmaster, Deathly Haste, which is while you're in Shroud, you basically have perma quickness to you and all your allies.
Yeah, you do.
Oh.
You can have 100% perma quickness on Necro all of the time, or on Harbinger all the time, for 5 people.
Yeah.
And that's obviously fine. Balance-wise, that is on paper okay. Right? We have stuff that does it. Chronomancer does that. Firebrand does that. The problem I have with it is how passive
it's that it does 30k DPS too, while it's completely passive.
That's not so bad either. Like, because Firebrand could kind of do that.
Yeah.
But
it's auto-attacking.
Yeah. So it's that's the problem, right? That is the problem we're going to get into, which is Harbinger.
Teapot sounds like he's dying.
Well,
I was just going to say Harbinger does these things, but it makes it too easy for them to do these things.
I'm not actually entirely sure if I agree with that. I think the rotation is a bit weird because if you look at Shroud, right? Shroud is very loaded up with utility, actually, funny enough, right? Like the first skill and the second skill are damage, but 3-4 are mobility. You have like a dash, and you have a leap, and then you also have a big AoE CC on the 5th skill. But let's compare this to something like Reaper. Like, what's the DPS rotation in Reaper when you go in Shroud? You press the 4th skill and you auto-attack. Like, this is not actually anything necessarily new. For Necro. And if you look at, say, Scourge, you just kind of like mash your buttons and it vaguely does damage. And like the real key skill is the Shroud. The other ones are more utility focused. So it's not necessarily that new. And honestly, comparatively, the rotation is much higher pace as well. Like, you have to use your Shroud to transfer, use Dagger to transfer, pop your elixirs, Blood is Power, swapping between Scepter and Pistol for once instead of using only the same main hand of Scepter. So I think the rotation is actually a lot more dynamic than anything else. And I would actually argue that Firebrand is much easier to pull off than Harbinger. On Firebrand, you have a lot of tools at your disposal outside of doing damage and quickness. Harbinger, yeah, it does like 34k DPS, I think, approximately, and gives perma quickness to 5 targets, which is all good and all, but Firebrand, when you're playing quickness, is doing approximately a similar DPS, around 30k or so DPS, while giving perma quickness, but you also have Aegis, you can take stability, and you have healing and F3 thrown into that.
Oh yeah,
in my opinion,
that Harbinger.
That's actually kind of fair, right? I think it's fair. With that,
yeah.
I think
that's sure. I wasn't arguing that Harbinger does more than Firebrand. I was just saying that you could do so much with Harbinger compared to other classes while doing so little, while like trying so little.
Yeah. And I think what you're getting at there is something that I definitely agree with. Would you say that the issue is that particularly the quickness is just incredibly passive? So you're playing DPS, but you take one trait and you give quickness automatically, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I would agree. I would agree.
All of the shroud traits are just totally boring. Like they should make the quickness come out on the like number 2 skill or something. Something that you have to like actually think about pressing instead of it just happens. I don't know that it necessarily has to be the number 2 skill, but that's the one you want to use for the big damage. Maybe it could. I don't know. But it should be different than just coming out on just passively. All of the Grandmasters, the first one does power damage. It just pulses power damage. The second one pulses quickness, and the last one pulses condition damage. It's just boring. Why would you?
And because the top 3 trait, like the power trait line and the Condi trait line, are so similar in design, it really makes the power trait line look bad because the Condi trait line on each of them is just slightly better.
It shouldn't even have a power trait line. They should just get rid of it. They should get rid of it. Like at a minimal, trade it out for like Scourge or something, or the Condi trait line on Reaper. Like give the one to Harbinger to Reaper, and then put all the chill stuff in Harbinger. I don't know.
Yeah.
Reaper, I don't think should have any Condi at all, and like Harbinger has no place having power because it's just pointless.
Yeah, I think in general the issue is absolutely the design. I think just pulsing AoE, it's just not active. It's very passive, which I don't think is very exciting. And there is definitely a lack of blight. I actually really like the suggestion here. Grandmaster's letting you choose an F2 skills that interact with blight. Yeah, I think Harbinger is actually one of those things that could maybe use an F2 that interacts with blight, because that inherently makes the elixirs more interesting too. Because then, of course, one of the things that elixirs do is that it gives you blight, right? Whenever you drink one, you get some additional blight stacks. So then maybe if you do have a second ability, like an F2 button that does something based on how much blight you have, or under certain conditions uses blight in some way, then that would be pretty interesting. As opposed to just having pulsing AoEs. Because pulsing AoE, just as a side note here, guys, not a very happy thing for PvP. Just warning you guys, okay? Just flat out pulsing AoEs, that ain't good, right? Like, not what you want to see.
I have an idea.
Okay.
Keep its utilities while it's in Shroud, and while it's out of Shroud, the elixirs take away blight, and while it's in, they give blight. That could be cool. That would be really cool.
Yeah, or a trait that does that.
Yeah, and so that's how you get rid of the AFK quickness, because you have to just keep up with the elixir all the time. You could increase the duration on that, and so you have to use it in Shroud, and you want to give yourself blight so you do more damage at the same time. But just get rid of the stupid shitty pulse.
Yeah.
Easy.
I agree.
Easy.
Also, kind of, this might just be me, but I also like elixirs. They're a little boring. They're useful because you get the boons and you get the blight, but they're a little boring. Maybe they could, that trait that says share with friends, instead of it just being an AoE 240 around you, ground targeted instead. It becomes ground targeted your elixirs. And that way you have a little bit more fun playing with it.
Yeah, that would be really cool. You throw them instead of drink them.
Yeah.
Like old ranger traps.
Yeah, like so the trait would make them ground targeted then instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. I could see that being pretty cool. I think that in general though, do you think they should do something else than just give boons? Because essentially what they're very similar to a NG is right now. Like NG elixirs are basically the same, with the exception of Elixir S and obviously Elixir X, the elite. But then again, I would definitely say that the Elixir of Ambition, giving every boon in the game, that's a pretty fun skill, right? That's a good one, right?
That.
So I think that's fine as it is. But I think maybe some of the elixirs could do something.
Yeah, the stun break is boring. The stun break is boring. The other ones like 10 Might and Fury is boring.
What do you do? Do you do unique effects, like some kind of unique special effect?
What are we talking about?
Well, I don't know. Like, what do you do to make them more interesting? Like, what are we gonna do to these skills to make them more interesting? You think they're fine?
Yeah, just nerf everything else, and then I think it's fine. Seriously.
It's possible that making them ground targeted would make them more interesting enough for us.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think having a trait to do that, they seem boring, but I don't really have that much of a problem with them, because let's be completely honest, like this seems like a dumb argument to make almost, but you're barely gonna play any of them anyways because there are other utilities that are just too good. You're gonna have Epidemic, you're gonna have
Depends
Blood
what
is
you're
Power.
doing.
Blood is power.
You're gonna have those always, or you're gonna have the Signet of Undeath to just generate life force passively too and counteract the blight mechanic.
So actually, here we go. I think if we the biggest changes to this that I think would be great would be, I don't know how exactly, but change the power line to make it more interesting. If you're gonna have a power line, and then all you got to do with the vial line, with the elixir line, is I like vials. It's good. I would keep it. The middle one, ground targeted instead of just an AoE around you, and the Grand Master, instead of a pulsing quickness while you're in Shroud, do what Brazil was saying. Do the when you're in Shroud, your elixirs become something else, and maybe they also grant quickness when you're in Shroud.
Okay.
Yeah. I think just being in Shroud, giving you Blight while you're in Shroud, and then taking away Blight while you're out of Shroud could be something. Because when you're out of Shroud, you lose. This is one of the biggest. Is it okay if I jump to something else?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we're on the train right now. We're on the train.
Because this is something that I actually find really, really frustrating, because the Blight heals you, so you're constantly losing life force. Like when you have Blight, your life force will heal you. But if you lose a stack of Blight, all of your life force goes down by a certain percentage. Like it just drops off. And I had no idea what was happening at first until I studied it. But you just like persistently will lose. As long as you have Blight, you're just going to lose life force outside of it. And that's why the corrupted talent, that trait, like I have a lot of, like I'm really frustrated by that, because it just seems like a band-aid to fix the Blight interaction mechanic, because you can always go into Shroud whenever, no matter what, and you gain life force when you go into Shroud. Like, okay, but I think that only happens, that trait's only there just because you just lose life force constantly all the time, and it's kind of annoying that like you whenever you have stacks of Blight that go away, the life force just goes. It's frustrating, and maybe if you could cleanse it off and change the interaction a little bit different with elixirs, or the heal skill, you could just make the heal skill remove all Blight, and you heal based off of how much Blight was removed, because the heal skill right now is an HP loss. If you use it, you heal and you just end up killing yourself because you apply Blight, and then your life force goes away. It's really dumb.
Well, I mean, with stuff like that, though, I mean, this is what the third trait line could be for, right? What if the third trait line would be whenever you lose a stack of Blight, you gain X life force, for example, to kind of mitigate that a little bit.
That'd be interesting.
Because
yeah, your life force does stay at a certain thing while your max goes up, so it's like you're losing percentage of your life force.
Yeah. But yeah, you do heal a fair bit because of the extra life force, because the life force basically turns into HP if you aren't at full health. And weirdly enough, it's actually one of these skills. The skill is a lot stronger in PvP, oddly enough. It heals for 5k in PvP, I believe, and it only heals for 1.9k in PvE, which is it's very uncommon. Really interesting to see that, right? It's one of the few skills that is worse in PvE than PvP, right? Which I think is super interesting. The way that
do you think that was intentional, or was it just they buffed it in PvP?
Yeah, I think they knew that you probably run that to give yourself Blight in PvE, but they wanted to avoid giving it a lot of sustain, right? They wanted to minimize the sustain it has as much as possible.
Speaking of sustain, that passive heal when you're out of Shroud.
Good. It is good.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
With tormenting runes, and if you play, first of all, you really just need the tormenting runes because you get so much fucking sustain from that. But also, if you play the trait in curses instead of the scepter trait, the one where your condition damage just heals you, it's not even an issue. Like you don't even it's people talk about it being Green Weaver, because if you're like maxed out on Blight, you have like 11,000 HP with Viper's gear. Yeah. But you have so much healing and sustain from tormenting runes and then parasitic contagion. You really you just get a lot of damage for free basically because you just sustain yourself like mad.
Yeah, there's one thing that's interesting about the design of Harbinger that I'm not entirely sure I like overall, but I understand why it is the way it is that vitality is so much more important to your healing as a Harbinger than healing power. And that's weird to me, right? Like the fact that your passive heal is entirely based on your vitality and not at all based on your healing.
I like it. I think that's a really cool interaction.
I don't mind it. I just think it's weird that that's how it works. You know, like that healing power has no effect whatsoever on it.
Yeah, it is weird.
Plague Doctor would be broken as hell.
Yeah, it is really weird the way it works for sure, and that's why it's kind of fun because it's so out there for that reason. But no, I actually really like that mechanic because I think they wanted to make it like very selfish, right? I think they were like, we kind of don't want people to find some way to horribly break it in the same way that you did with Scourge. And I think they're streamlining the way it works, which is why it's so surprising to me that they added a power trait line. Because if you think about it, Necro has like the perfect trinity, right? You have Reaper, power DPS, Scourge, support thingy, and then Harbinger, Condi spec. But for some reason, they just said, you know what? Can play power as well. Boom. There you go. Even though it sucks, it's actually very bad. But there you go. That's kind of an interesting one.
So in PvP, I was having a little bit of trouble with fighting against a Harbinger as my Ellie. And then I realized why. It's because every time I was putting my magnetic auras on me and trying to make his shroud skills get reflected onto him, it wouldn't do anything. Because apparently right now, Shroud 1 as a Harbinger does not reflect. The projectiles get destroyed when they hit a magnetic aura, but they don't reflect. So hopefully that's one of the things that is going to be fixed before the spec actually gets released.
I mean, they're supposed to be unblockable and just not reflectable whatsoever, so I'm sure they'll fix that soon.
Yeah.
On the elixirs topic, that's an interesting idea. What if like if you give Harbinger an F2, what if it has an F2 and the effect of the F2 is dependent on the last elixir you took?
Ooh.
So it's a bit like NG, but you don't have to add like another 5 buttons. You just add 1 button, and like the last elixir.
And it would have a baseline if you didn't drink an elixir, I guess.
Maybe it just does nothing if you didn't drink an elixir, like steel. It just doesn't. You have to actually activate it for it to do something. And then also you can have the Grandmaster traits interact with that. So then you can have the quickness one that means so you give quickness or something like that. When you in some way you drink an elixir, boom, AOE shares some quickness when you pop the F2 or something like that, or it does something in that vein instead.
They should give it a puke animation too.
Yeah.
That
would be good. Yeah,
you just
game already.
Nightmare Fractal. Yeah, the Nightmare Fractal, where it's just the AOE. Yeah, that's what we do right there.
Yeah.
See game.
That'd be kind of cool for F2. What do you guys think about F3? So it's like on a 5-second cooldown essentially, a nice little dash with some stuff on it, but we don't have fear anymore on a shroud anymore. So like a lot of traits that rely on fear, you only really get with Harbinger with Staff 5 and the utility skill. And then on top of that, there's, I think, a death magic trait that says whenever you kill someone, you reduce the cooldown at F3 by 3 seconds, which in this case does't do anything, right?
I think it's spite, right? I think it's like
spite,
I know the one. Yeah, I know the one. I mean, you can. I mean, that's quite funny because you can leap around really quickly. I guess. I think it reduces the cooldown by 50%. I think.
No, so, when I looked at it, it was 3 seconds.
Well, I mean that might be around 3 seconds.
Okay. No, I mean the trait wrote the word 3 seconds.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe it's something like that. I mean, yeah, maybe it's different on because I thought it was 50. I thought it was like a percentile modifier, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Have that big speed. Okay, some of that is kind of fun. I mean, you can imagine just killing someone and then leaping to another target. In PvE, that could obviously be very entertaining in a way. You can bam, you like just kill something, boom, leap away immediately, like keep going around like crazy all over the place. But yeah, it's actually another one of the things that actually kind of I think it's quite weak actually in PvE for that reason. So you can't just have it up permanently.
Why only 5% in PvP Warfar's World? It's not like you kill that many things in PvP World. Well, for Warfar's World, never mind.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually good in PvP. I think it's 50% in PvP as well. I think it's actually unnerfed in PvP. I think it's only nerfed in World versus World as far as I'm aware. I think. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it's because you just kill so many things, right? And then you'd be able to have.
Would it be a
perma
bad
style.
idea to put fear back on the, like, when you hit with your F3 ability, put fear back on it, but increase the cooldown of it?
When you say F3, do you mean the Shroud 3?
Shroud F3, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Just give it taunt.
Oh,
Taunt instead of fear. You pull them in.
to clarify, actually, when I said F2, guys, I was talking about a new button, and I don't think it needs fear. I don't think I think Harbinger not having any fear is actually quite interesting, and not having any corruption built into its kit directly.
Yeah.
I think
Looks like it's not popular. People do not want fear on this. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it already has some CC to it. That AoE float is a monster, by the way. It's such a short cast time, especially with quickness, by the way. And 3-second float. Oh, ouch! That is very unfortunate. It is good. It is. It very much is.
Can I talk about an example of the float real fast?
Let's go.
I was doing back warg in Escort last night. From the time the warg spawned, I would use 2 elixirs to give myself blight. I would put down Scepter 2 to cripple, Plague Lands, and as soon as it walked into the Plague Lands, I would float it, auto attack. It would get 50 stacks of Torment, plus everything else, and by the time it walked out of the Plague Lands, it was dead. It's just, you just dump so much stuff. The float is so cool and it's so strong. And combined with everything else,
something you have to be channeling to float. It's like you float it, and then you could just auto them for 3 seconds.
And they die,
Yeah. It's
definitely a juicy one. It really is. Yeah. And actually, to do the elixir thing, though, once again, I agree. It would have to have some kind of baseline effect as well, because otherwise, if you don't take an elixir, your F2 does nothing, and that's probably not good. Okay, just that's a good idea. But yeah, I think not having fear is good. I mean, look, it's not like you just don't have fear on Harbinger, guys. Because think about it, you can just take, I don't know, the fear ring. You can take staff, right? It's not like you have no fear on the build. This is that you're going to have to actually take it on your utilities, and instead of having it part of your baseline kit, which I think is fine. I mean, every other necrospec has a load of baseline fear. Harbinger is different. It's a different type of necromancer. I think it's okay that it doesn't have fear. And hey, you don't have to take those traits, right? You can take other things. I mean, particularly the fear traits have a lot of really strong counterparts anyway. Talking about stuff like fear of death and terror, these traits have really good alternatives. Particularly the extra vitality is really good in soul reaping, or the extra damage too if you're just going for all out DPS. And the boon corruption on the 4-second cooldown at Shroud 2, it's pretty good. It's pretty strong trait there. So it's pretty good. Path of Corruption. Oh yeah.
Soul reaping is very strong with Harbinger.
Yes, Doomfire, very good.
It's really busted. It is.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
if you're going around general PvE, like Soul Reaping and Spite is just really nice with 25 stacks of might and 25 stacks of vulnerability.
Perma quickness. There it is.
And the quickness, yeah.
Actually, very strong. Yeah, it's very, very good. Like, with how much damage you can do. It's definitely a good fun build to solo on, because you might have low health, but you're gonna have Tormenting Rune on probably, right? You might even run Trailblazer if you wanted to kind of just really double down on it, so you have more vitality, and so you have loads of toughness, so you don't die. Like, very fun solo build to play, I think. Just off the back of how much health gain it can get and how much damage it can do. It can self-buff itself very nicely, and provide a lot of value, guys. A lot of value to itself. It's good. It's very, very good.
So, is there anything you would change besides maybe a couple of vile ideas we had, and maybe what would we do to the power line if we could change it?
Remove it.
But replace it with what?
Stuff to modify Blight. Make Blight have different interactions.
Yep. Yeah. I'd say something that interacts with profession mechanics. Like, have things that interact with the profession mechanic more.
Oh, speaking of Blight, sorry, actually, I'll just come back to it later. We'll do the trait line for the power first.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I got really excited.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, we can go to that next then. But yeah, I mean, I would just make it so that there's something that's a bit more utility focused, something that interacts a bit more, as opposed to just loads of passives. I think in general, the Harbinger traits are not good. They're very, very passive. outside the elixir ones, which are a bit more active, obviously. But yeah, I'm just not a big fan of the traits overall. I think that I think even a lot of the colony ones, well, certainly maybe like the pistol trait should be looked at, because the pistol trait just says, oh, you have cooldown reduction on it, basically. And you gain extra expertise, which I guess is fine, but. I think it could be. I guess it's basically it's the same as the Scourge trait, right? Like the Scourge trait is, you gain expertise based off condition damage, and this one is you gain expertise based off vitality. So it's like the same trait, but I think it can have a bit more flavor. I kind of like, the traits I really like. I like the traits that change weapon skills, stuff like Lingering Curse and like Glacial Blow, and maybe doing that is a bit over designy sometimes, but. I'm a big fan of abilities that change based on if you take a trait or not. I think those are really fun. They're really exciting to actually use those. But yeah, I don't know. That would be my thing. But other than that, yeah, I think it's fine. Profession mechanic is fine. Ultimately, everything's good about Harbinger. It's just that I think the traits are very, very lacking, and maybe it needs another button that does something with elixirs to help it have more interactions. The traits and Harbinger feel very, very separate, right? They're just a bunch of passives, and I think that the goal with an elite specialization should always be to have the build be very cohesive, right? Like everything makes sense and everything change everything else. So traits affect how you play the game, whereas Harbinger, it doesn't do that. The traits don't really change your gameplay that much. They just change the outcome of that gameplay. Right? It's like, are you giving quickness? Well, yeah, but you're doing the same thing, basically. Are you doing power damage? Yeah, but you're doing the same thing. Right? The traits do not really change the way you would actually play the spec, which is, where you would praise Willbender, because Willbender, well, for what it's worth, it will change the way you die and how quickly you die, probably.
There is a way to play the spec where the traits don't matter at all, though, unfortunately.
And just don't use them.
Don't use Shroud and just heal it like 1.5k healing per second all the time, and just stack your Shroud as a healing mechanic and just be a tank that way. It's not great. You're now a Necro just with ridiculous regeneration, and like your entire Grandmaster line doesn't do anything. But it's a thing. It's a thing.
In a way, I think that's semi-intentional, though. Like, I think Harbinger is supposed to be very in and out. So you might go into Shroud for a little bit, like do a bit of DPS, then you use your mobility to disengage, drop out, then boom, like rinse and repeat, right? And then you re-sustain based off of the life force. And yeah, obviously, if there is like this bunker build, because I know a few people have been playing with it and kind of experimenting, with a few kind of tanky variants of Harbinger, something like that could definitely be very unhealthy. But I don't think necessarily like a duelist Harbinger would necessarily be a problem, right? They said that it's kind of like this, they want it to be a bit of a gunslinger, right? That was their inspiration for the theme. So if that was a kind of a duelist, right, that could 1v1 you effectively, I think that would be okay. But as long as it doesn't get too out of hand, like if it's really, really insane, like you just can't kill it because it's gaining so much health, then yeah, I think that would be a problem. But the thing is, I think that would actually almost never happen, because in general, if you're thinking about PvP, right, sustain HP gain is not necessarily what makes something tanky. It's more like mitigation that makes something very tanky a lot of the time. So it doesn't matter if you're healing like 1k a second. Like, that's not going to save you from a 1v2. It's just not. Like, having stuff like blocks, invulns, reflects, like big disengages, right? That's what actually saves you. So I think Harbinger wouldn't become insanely obnoxious in this regard compared to something like,
It can be, though, because if you're not dipping into Shroud very often, you'll always have your mobility skills up, and you'll always have that 20-second cooldown, 3-second float thing up. So you could always play the, a duelist spec kind of, but then get away whenever you're getting 2v1.
Yeah. I mean, suppose you play that in PvP, though. So that means whenever you get +1, you run away a little bit, right?
You leave, yeah.
But that means that all of a sudden now you're in a 1v1.
Isn't that kind of what you have to do most of the time anyway with any...
Well, it is, but if you're playing like this kind of really tanky build, you're probably not going to have a lot of damage, right? So this means the other 1v1er, you're just going to be fighting him 1v1 on the enemy node. So the build kind of wouldn't be good. Because if you never go in Shroud, then you can't kill the other guy, pretty much. Because you're going to be like, what, pistol auto-attacking him to death? I mean, I don't know.
You have full power and axe stuff. But yeah, no, you're right.
It could be annoying. It could be obnoxious, I suppose. Yeah. But I don't see that. I mean, if it is a problem, it should be nerfed, obviously. But you know what? I want to hear what Brazil was excited about. I want him to just lay it on, like slam it, like just.
Well, it's not anything crazy, I guess. It kind of is, but Well, talking about the traits also real fast, just to jump before we fully jump over, I think there should be a trait that reduces your max health by 25%,
Oh,
but you do like 10 or 25% more damage.
Like
Anyways,
on top of Blight?
yeah.
isn't this
Your
something that
base health is just reduced.
Isn't this something that you've always wanted for Reaper? I think didn't you always
Yes.
want this for Reaper? Like what?
I've always wanted
yeah.
this mechanic.
Yeah. So like you either do damage to yourself, or you like sacrifice life to increase your DPS, or like you actively want to be low HP or something like that, so you can do more damage. I mean,
it's like the indomitable fighter with like an evil spirit behind him. Like he's hurting himself, like the berserker armor in Berserk. You're hurting yourself so you can do full damage to other people and they have no chance. Like that whole mechanic is just really cool to me. I think it's awesome.
The anti-scholar rune, like more damage below 90%.
Exactly. The perfect segue away from that is like being able to track Blight currently and the UI, because it's a little icon in the corner of your screen that's purple with white text on it, and it's very like just at the beginning. Like just to start off, like it's hard to see how many stacks you have because just the color of it. And I've thought about this. They could add something like barrier where it comes up from the bottom of the bar and it just grows, but that doesn't necessarily indicate how many stacks you have. So maybe they could just give you that like for a visual, put how many stacks you have on that, instead of just having how much health you're losing. That's just distracting in my opinion.
Yeah. I
just
think that's
saying
something
like
they will do.
Yeah, having like a negative 10,000 health, I don't care about that. I just want to see how many stacks of Blight I have.
I think
And I already, it could be, yeah. And yeah, the astral energy bar, that was another thing that I was thinking. And they, like on Druid, now you've got the bar at the top that just grows. They just need a way to make it obvious how many stacks you have, I think, maybe. Maybe it doesn't matter. But the other thing...
Signet of Undeath, when you could actually see half.
Yeah, how much health you're going to pay. It takes away half. The other thing that I think is actually really cool, but that's difficult to notice, is they kind of already do this. Because if you look at the character model, you start out like from your feet to your head, you glow green the more Blight stacks you have. You'll progressively turn, like whenever you have like one stack, like just the tip of your toes is green, and when you have 25 stacks, like your whole like character model is like green and like stuff spewing out of it and you look fully corrupted. It's really cool, but they just need to add a way to track that better onto the UI, because it's just right now it's really difficult. There's so much stuff in your face. If you get barrier on top of it, there are 50,000 numbers on the HP bar, and it's just really unpleasant to look at. It's kind of messy. That's probably out of everything my biggest complaint about the whole thing, about the whole spec.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, on this kind of topic, do you guys get the impression that in a way, these elite specs are actually not that finished?
Yes.
This is something that, you know, just as a general thing, they all feel to not quite have that level of polish. The animations are there, right? You know, like Harbinger looks pretty cool, like Willbender looks pretty cool, like Virtuoso is pretty cool. But you know, I am going to be so curious, actually, the way the next ones, the next elite specs come out in September. I just wonder if these are actually the ones that they maybe weren't that sure about, right? They were a little bit uncertain about how these are and what state they're in, and they almost like want us to test them a lot because they are still in development a fair bit, right?
I mean, we're half a year away from the release of the game, and it's a beta. That's literally, it's unfinished because this is a beta, and we're testing it, and they're gonna fix it.
And also, we're gonna buy the game. Like, they want our feedback. They want to know what people want to buy, because it's a business, it's a company. They need to make money. And if you have your community directly interface with you, because they're like, we want feedback. Granted, almost all of the feedback I saw on the official forums is totally worthless, because you'll have posts that say this entire spec needs a rebuild from the ground up, and that's all the post says. No, they want... it makes sense that they would just want feedback so they can understand what the players want and what the players will want to buy. I think that just gives the extra little level of like ArenaNet loves us that we've been getting for a bit. I'm down with it. I think it's cool.
Well, what I was mostly getting at there is that, do you guys think they'll actually make mechanical changes to these things and actually rework them a little bit? Because look at Path of the Fire. They didn't actually rework any of them mechanically, right? Because we had a similar thing. We had a beta. We had some beta
a week before the game came out, though.
Yeah, but this is what I mean, right? We know they didn't really like the Path of aspects. They were what they were, and they didn't really change, right? But now that we've got more time, do you think they're going to be a lot more likely to say, okay, this is something that needs to be added? Like, oh, we need to add an F2 here. Oh, maybe we need to add it, to add this, remove that, change how that skill works. Actually rework it.
I think we're going to get some reworks. I don't know if we're going to get overhauls. I don't think we're going to get overhauls, but we're going to get... I mean, Path of Fire, it was less of a beta and more of a preview, that beta. So, but we're so far out. I think they're doing this on purpose to, tweak things before it comes to game.
Well, what do you think that the magnitude of those tweaks can be, though? Like, how much do you think they would do?
Well, definitely bug fixes. Tuning to Willbender to make it stronger and maybe change. I have a feeling they would change the clunkiness of some of the animations. Would they rework an entire line in Harbinger, like Power Line? I don't know. I don't know if they would actually do something like that.
That's the question. Maybe? Well, that's kind of the question I'm asking, because in my opinion, it would be actually a real shame if Harbinger launched like that, because not only is the power damage shit, it's also boring, right, with the way it is. And if they don't change the GM traits, I think the spec, it's like wasted potential in a way, because it's just not that exciting with the way it works mechanically, But yeah, that's kind of my take on that. I hope that they do actually have a bit of mobility on this, a little bit of agile development here, because I think that the specs right now are... They might end up being strong and having good numbers and being effective, but I think that they really lack in having a bit of flair, particularly with the trait interactions. So I think that that's kind of like something that would need to change, I think, to really give them the same level of quality. Because for me, elite specializations have always been like a big selling point. Like, honestly, the biggest selling point of the expansion. I mean, look, these kids over at World of Warcraft, they add like one new class with an elite spec. We add 9 over here, right? Every time we have an expansion, right? This is a huge deal. This is the ultimate thing. Like, you can play this brand new specialization, brand new build and way of playing the game. And I don't know. It does scare me a little bit if the new specializations don't really wow people. I think people would miss it more than... I know I'm just going, oh yeah, dude, I can't wait to be a cat girl. Oh, I can't wait to be an anime character, right? But, being an anime character, the novelty will wear off. I think the real longevity of the game does stem from the gameplay stuff. Well, unless you're Renji, okay? Unless you're Renji, in which case, yes, you can be an anime character forever, right? But there, with a very few exceptions, I think that the real meat of the gameplay and the elite specializations need to be, pretty exciting, right? Like, actually, Nike this is a really fucking good example here. I think a lot of warrior players, particularly PvE warrior players, they were like, dude, Spellbreaker, that sounds so sick. And then it was like, oh, it's not very good, right? And yeah, it doesn't have to be good in every game mode, but I think if every spec is like this, and it's kind of like, oh, I guess this is kind of cool, right? But it's if everything's lukewarm, I think a lot of the players are going to come away with a slightly bad impression,
Yeah, I think the big litmus test is going to be the 4th beta, where everything's back in the game, to see what they've changed, to see what we could expect for the actual game, like to see if they are actually on the ball about changing things that need changing or not.
Yeah. I hope they gather some good feedback and don't look at the official forums. Although they
should ban everyone on the official forums.
Here's
Here's the real hot take. All right. All of the people that say this spec needs an entire rework from the ground up, and the people who say I've played World versus World for 800,000 hours and Harbinger is bad, and then they just list off a bunch of stupid reasons. Those are the people, like, that's why all of the trait lines are just boop, 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 for the role that you want to play. They make it ultra simple because the people that play the class are ultra simple. Let's just be real. All of the feedback from the simple people on the forums are valuable because they need to make a spec that will mesh with those people. So maybe the passive AFK stuff is gonna stay there because they just need people to face roll. I don't know, but it's just that's the part that really scares me about the feedback and all the shit.
Definitely, they're gonna ignore the advice that says you need to rework this entire thing.
Yeah,
that's automatically ignored.
Well, they should obviously ignore that. Yeah, you can't just say, "Oh yeah, Willbender sucks. Make something new." That's obviously bad feedback, right? But I think stuff like, "Oh yeah, this trait line doesn't make sense," or this block of traits doesn't make sense, or the traits don't feel they impact gameplay. I think that's like valid feedback, right? I think that's something that could be acted on.
Mm.
And
so
and they even try and do this. Like the thing is why I'm quite hopeful is because they do this with regular trait lines, right? For example, they reworked death magic like 5 times to try and make it exciting, right? And they did this with explosives like corruption, right? Like, yeah, with like all of Mesmer, yeah, yeah. There's a whole bunch. Like they do actually try and do this, so I'm quite hopeful about this that they would do this. And on the like easy to play thing, yeah, this is one of the things that really struck me. I think that in a way, ArenaNet might not do this, and they might keep it fairly streamlined exactly because of that. And
to be fair, if they don't change the Grandmaster middle on Harbinger and it stays the pulsing AoE quickness, although I think it's not necessarily a good idea, I would still love it because it's just so nice and easy to use, you know? It's like it's like changing the mantras on Mesmer. It's like, yeah, I don't like the idea of changing mantras on Mesmer because I liked, you know, interesting interactive gameplay and decisions you make, and now it's just you press a button and you get your effect. But in the long run, it's like, okay, I'm not upset that they changed it because these are easy to use now. I don't know, you know?
Well, do you know what the problem I have with this, actually, is that I think this actually is a slippery slope that is not a fallacy. Because then what about weapon stowing? That's kind of an unintuitive mechanic, right? Do we get rid of that as well? What about dodge jumping? That's a kind of unintuitive mechanic, right? It's a bit weird to pull it off. Do we get rid of that too? Like, if we're going to streamline the game's mechanics down really, really hard with the way the abilities work...
Oh, man. If they removed combos? Ooh.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if we streamline the game too much, you're going to strip away a lot of what makes the gameplay, like, really interactive. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I think there is definitely virtue in making it so that the complexity of the game is in the game. Because I think the goal with the traits being a lot more streamlined is that, you know, you don't have to, you know, there's no skill in like knowing what traits to pick, if that makes any sense. Like, it's more like how you actually play the game. I think I'm expressing that correctly. That makes sense to me, but I think it also really does suck that you're like so railroaded into like the choices that you make. It's not even a choice. Like, if you want to play a certain way, you aren't making a decision and it doesn't affect your gameplay. And I think that sucks. Like, there really is only one version of Harbinger. It's just that the numbers are going to pop up differently. Like, that is what that does. And to me, that's very interesting. And well, we'll get to this soon because actually, we still got one more elite spec to do, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Virtuoso, I think, suffers the exact same thing. Like, you're only going to be playing Virtuoso, and it's very, very similar. The numbers just pop up differently. And yeah, I'm really worried about stripping away too much complexity from the game, because I think you have to have a certain level of it. Otherwise, the game kind of becomes boring, particularly on a theorycraft and your creativity level. I think a good system, and the whole point of traits, right, is that it allows the player to be creative and play differently and have a different playstyle. Whereas right now, particularly for Harbinger, I think it only has one playstyle.
I think you're right about that, and I think that's something I care about a lot, actually, because you know
bad builds.
What I like to do, right? Exactly. And the only way I could do that is if there is options for me to take that are worse, or that are really bad, and not just numbers worse, like not optimal, but just bad, you know? And with Virtuoso, I think you're right. With Harbinger, I think you're right. It's like there are ways to play it. There's ways to build it differently, but just not really ways to play it that differently. And that hurts.
Yeah, and yeah, that what you just said there, you're absolutely right. That is honestly better. That's more succinct than I put it. So listen to Boots, guys. You know, there's more than one way to build it, but not more than one way to play it, which is the fundamental problem. I will say that I'm not super concerned about this.
We've only had a week.
Right?
We could
Yeah.
maybe think of some fun things later
Yeah,
on.
maybe we can think of some fun things. And also, I think it is worth noting that Willbender, in my opinion, doesn't suffer from this, right? As much like the traits do kind of change the way you might interact with it a little bit more. But still, it does rustle me a little bit for what might be coming in the future with the elite spec design. But should we talk about Virtuoso?
Go ahead. Virtuoso, do you want to talk really quickly about courage in World versus World with Willbender and Mystic Rebuke?
This is definitely something that's worth highlighting. Now, this is obviously going to be fixed, so they're probably going to nerf Shattered Ages even harder.
The only way to fix it is to actually give it a stomp on the F1.
Yeah. No, you know what they do? They make Shattered Ages stomp people. That's the actual real solution.
There you go. AoE stomp.
Okay, yeah, AoE stomp on Shattered Ages. But yeah, there's a very unusual interaction right now because of a consequence of the way the virtues work on Willbender. Is that basically on the courage, crashing courage, when you're in this mode of courageous zerging, every 5 hits you land gives you an Aegis. But oh wait, every time you detonate an Aegis with Shattered Aegis, you hit 5 targets. So in other words, every time you get hit, you get an Aegis. So you block everything that isn't unblockable, and you also immediately nuke everyone like 1,000,000 times a second, and you can do hundreds of thousands of damage with this. And yeah, I actually think that Shattered Aegis, like it will get the boot for this. It will probably get an ICD. Unlucky, but it is fun.
Courage would, not Shattered Aegis, right?
I think they do it the shot. Yeah, maybe they'd give courage. It can only proc once a second, I guess. Maybe. But
you know what? I don't because like I always hate nerfing core traits to deal with problems with elite specs. So that's why I say courage gets a tweak over Shattered Ages. But at the same time, I like the way courage works. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah, that's true. They could give it an ICD only on Willbender, right? Just to like dodge that interaction and not touch courage, because I think courage only proccing once a second would actually be kind of unfortunate with the way it works, particularly seeing as like the way we've been talking about it. We think it should proc more often anyway, right? To give it that ability to sustain itself pretty well. But I don't know. Like it is a fun interaction.
Or just leave it in the game.
Yeah, true. Maybe just leave it in the game. Like it's the brand new meta. New meta is kicking in there. Okay, let's go.
It can't be worse than Resistance Rune. It can't be worse than Resistance Runes.
Wait, what's with the Resistance Runes?
No, the old ones. That's what they were, right? The Rune of Resistance. That everyone just ran around with every boon all of the time. Like you played that on Chronomancer.
Oh yeah, like you could do like loads of boon share stuff in World vs. Audio. That was everyone was like running. Yeah, I think it was durability rune, right? You would just like stack durability rune and just perma extend to everything. Like that was that was a rune so good that literally every build ran it. Probably not what you want to see. Not exactly ideal.
I wonder. So like that would be bad to have in the game. 5-man Willbender groups Zerg busting, probably not a great idea.
Yeah, not the healthiest, I'd say.
Okay.
But anyway, Virtuoso. Now, as I understand it, you two aren't excited about Virtuoso, or you're a bit like, yeah, whatever about Virtuoso. Would that be correct in saying, approximately?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I'm just Mesmer in general. I have a very hard time. Here's my thing. Okay, here's my thing. I used to really love playing Chrono Tank. I really loved it. Like the Minstrel build. The Minstrel build was something that people told me would never work out, and look where we got with that. It definitely worked out. But I loved it. I really loved Chronomancer, and then they changed it, and so I had to relearn it, and it was fine, whatever, no problem. Relearned Chronomancer, and then they changed it. Relearned it, and then they changed it, and they just nerfed it like 5, 6, maybe it was even like 7 times in a row. It was a lot. So I just quit playing it. I was just like, fuck this. I don't want to play it anymore. Why would I play it if they're just going to change it every 2 months?
So now you're just kind of sour on Mesmer in general.
Yeah, just on Mesmer in general. Like, with Mirage. Mirage seemed broken to the point when it launched that it was like, there's no way that they're not just going to nerf this thing over and over. And I don't know if they did or not. I haven't really kept up with it.
They gave it 1 dodge.
Yeah, they gave it 1 dodge.
It only needs 1 dodge. So yeah.
But it's just that, and then Virtuoso also, like we've kind of talked about, or Teapot's talked about mostly, how it's probably the most fair spec they've ever made, and it has too much counterplay because you can just counterplay everything it does. It's like the dueling spec where the duelist that you're fighting has higher IQ than you all the time, and they're always like one step ahead. It's like in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu where you're fighting someone else with like a belt higher tier than yours. Like it's fair, but you're gonna lose because you can just put down Wall of Reflect and then they can't do anything. And in Zergs, they can't do anything because reflects are up. None of their stuff does anything. And it's just kind of sad.
My major issue, I think, with it's like an overarching issue with Virtuoso. I think is that so the three grandmasters are all identical to each other. Obviously, they're not because they're very different traits, but they all do the same outcome, which is you generate blades, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
they're different blade generation variants, like passive or like when you dodge, right? Or when you inflict a number of bleeds, right? Like 5 bleeds.
Yeah. So no matter what you do, if you pick one of those grandmasters, all it does is generate blades. And depending on your build, what you're doing, if you're more defensive, if you're more condi, if you just aren't either of those necessarily, you're going to pick one of the three based on what you're doing, but it does the same thing. And first of all, to me, that's very boring. Second of all, the fact that stocking blades, right now, I don't know if it's a bug or not. I hope it's a bug, but it doesn't interact with some of your traits and skills, like the Signet Heal and the Grandmaster in Inspiration, which says when you summon an illusion, you gain a little bit of health. Stocking Blades does nothing to those, so the Signet Heal is useless. That Grandmaster is useless. I know if they did do stuff, it would be very dangerous in a lot of cases. Like because the way illusions work now is if you summon an illusion and if you have max illusions, it replaces one of your illusions essentially. So your Signet will heal every time you summon an illusion, even if you're at max illusions. And these Grandmasters, because they're you stock a lot of blades with those Grandmasters. You will be healing probably way too much if they did interact that way, right? So there needs to be some kind of in between, right? My idea was kind of like if you're at max blades, stocking another blade wouldn't interact with the two traits, but I don't know if that would be enough. What do you think, Teapot?
I think it's kind of one of those situations where just say fuck it, let it interact. If it's a problem, then you can address it.
Yeah.
I think that might just be a bug. There's some other like weird stuff, for example, like Scepter. It's super interesting. Like you've got some reverse engineering in here. Like Scepter 3 doesn't actually say max clones; it says 3 clones. Scepter auto attack on them on Mesmer. Like if you basically it creates a clone unless you're at max clones, in which case it does more torment. But it will only generate a clone up to 3 because max clones is 3, right? So it ignores the fact that you can go to 5 on Virtuoso. So yeah, I think there's bugs actually. It's more that they just haven't really ironed out the bugs with it, rather than it's not, it's like, oh yeah, we were deliberately there. Maybe CMC was concerned about the bunker, right, with like the illusion inspiration stuff, because I think they were really scared of Mesmer, right? I think the reason why it is the fairest spec ever made, it's because Mesmer, as Brazil was talking about in PvE, has been a nightmare for ArenaNet, right? Is it Bunker Chrono, Chaos Mirage, right? Like, all this stuff is just, it might have been one of the most disruptive classes. I mean, look, some people would even blame Mesmer for the death of esports because of like Bunker Chrono, right? Like,
yes.
That is how bad it was. I think they were super terrified of making Mesmer just game breaking, right? So they were like, you know what, dude? What if we made the least broken elite specialization ever? And we gave it to Mesmer. And I think that's basically where we are. It is the least broken spec of all time. And
so, I think that's totally it right now. And I think they got to tweak it because of that. I think they got to make it interact with those things that I was talking about. But more importantly, if your 3 Grandmasters all do the same thing and all they do is stock blades for you, I think that the trait lines, at least, need to do more interaction with the blades. Because right now, I think there's just the bleed one that does stuff with the blades.
Well,
and
you get Aegis as well when you use
and
a
you get
blade soul.
Aegis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. So
I was gonna
just
say,
think that
you're absolutely right here. I think it's just it's the same thing as Harbinger. The traits are very disconnected from the mechanic, right? They don't do anything with the mechanic. This is somewhat justified, I would say, by the way, because Mesmer has a lot of traits that interact with its mechanic, you know, in like illusions, dueling and stuff like that. So it already has this to an extent. But yeah, I think that it does. I think there needs to be stuff that interacts with blade songs a fair bit more. And on the blade songing thing, I actually don't mind those traits. And I know this is very, very semantic and very ceremonial, but I would just say make them adept instead, right?
yeah, that's fair. That's
you know
fair.
what I mean?
They're not grandmaster traits to me.
Yeah, because GM is like, oh, it's really spicy, right? It's something that does something a little bit more. And even though it doesn't make any difference, right, where the trait is these days, but I think like, you know, moving the position around here would make it a bit more interesting. Like make them adapts and maybe like juice up the adapt. Make the adapt traits GM and like juice them up a little bit to make them a bit more exciting. But yeah, I think this Virtuoso really suffers from the exact same thing and more. Virtuoso, in my opinion, is the spec that is actually in the worst spot. Weirdly enough, I think Willbender and Harbinger are easier to fix than Virtuoso, because Virtuoso right now, and to be fair, I'd have to talk to CMC or one of the skills team to determine this, but I think Virtuoso just straight up fails in what it's supposed to do. Like, it's supposed to be, in my opinion, like the answer to the question that Mesmer has been asking for in World versus World. Like an actual cohesive build for it to play in a World versus World Zerg that isn't just like, oh, use Illusion of Life, slave, right? Like, you know, use Gravity well, focus 4, right? No, it's an actual build that would do something cohesively, and that's just something that Virtuoso just doesn't do. So it's got the same trait issues as Harbinger, but it also just doesn't do anything where it's supposed to do stuff, in my opinion. But there you go. Like I'm roasting Virtuoso, man. I'm going hard. I've got to do it. You know, I've got to bring the pain, because I think it's a very cool spec. Like thematically, it's amazing, right? I think it's super cool, the way it works. I think it's actually a well-designed spec. I can see it actually being not really unfun to play against too, which is always a nice bonus, right? And I think it would work well in PvP if, again, it had a bit more to it and it had a bit more that it could actually do. Because right now, it's just way too fair, way too counterplayable, and honestly, just doesn't really do anything, right? It doesn't have something that can do outside of PvE doing damage, which again is fine, but no. These days I play all the game modes, so I'm like, dude, I think this stuff should be designed for PvP and World versus World first, and then fuck it, they can just do loads of damage in PvE, right? Like I think specs should be generally, you should try and make them good in the.
That said, I think you got it. You got it there, because I think that a lot of these things were thought of about in PvE. Because if you do the benchmarks, although Harbinger is overtuned a little bit, the Mela did a benchmark thing, and I think they were all 42k or over.
Yeah, well, they're big.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, they balance them fine in PvE, kind of, if a little bit hard.
I think Harbinger should do more damage. I think it should finish at 50k.
Just as if it has lowest health possible?
Yep.
Okay.
50k DPS.
5,000, maybe like 7,500 HP. 7,500 HP, but 50k DPS. I would eat that up, and so would everyone else. People would actually play
maybe
it.
A little bit too high. Like,
nope.
Like 50k? 50k DPS?
I think it's fine. If you have 7,500 HP, I think it's totally fine. But honestly, you could give it 5,000 HP and it would be fine.
Bosses only have like 20 million health, though.
CM.
I think, you know what? Okay, fuck it.
It already does like 47. It does like 46, 47. Yeah, it's almost
maybe
there.
We should nerf that. Maybe we should reduce that instead, you know? Like, might be a little bit too high.
Nah.
Yeah.
Give the people what the people want.
Big numbers.
You blight cap at 49 stacks of blight, so you have 2% of your max HP. If you get hit by anything, die instantly. Yeah, that would make torment. Think about it though. Then you're like a 55 HP monk. You know, you have really low health, but you have really high sustain. So you can just, like, one prog of tormenting rune instantly heals you. Yeah, but the aura the aura tick kills you though. Like what about that? That's a bit unfortunate.
It's a good way to nerf Scourge too, because you can only have 50% of your health as barrier. So
So Scourge gives you a 5k parry, but it only is 200 on Harbinger because you only have like 400 HP.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh
good.
man, I mean,
I
yeah,
really
that
like
sounds like
that.
some good content.
I
Yeah,
really like that. Yeah.
yeah. That sounds balanced to me. I think honestly, time to add it to the game.
It goes back to the early days of League of Legends where Mordekaiser would build 6 gun blades and one-shot everyone. I love it. Love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Taking some old design principles, you know, we love to see it. We really do. But,
so for Virtuoso, what do you guys think? Does it need a movement skill on its dagger?
You know what? No, it's artillery. I don't think it needs movement. I think it needs. I think you kill that Condi trait line, stone dead, and you replace it with utility. Stuff like your blade songs have half range, but they can't be reflected or destroyed. So you can still block them, right, with like a shield block or something like that, but they'll go through reflects and projectile destruction. And all of a sudden, boom, like its issues are kind of fixed in World versus World. You could also have a dagger trait that does the same thing or something similar for daggers, for example, because then you can actually use that weapon. Because right now, again, it's completely projectile based in World versus World. You're dead. And by the way, I don't think you can actually really fix the projectile hate, by the way, guys, in World vs. World, because there are just so many players, right? Like, no matter what happens, like, there's always going to be a shit ton of projectile block because of how many people there are, right? There's just loads of players about the place, right? You know, you're going to have your Ellies, you're going to have your Guardians, right? You know, hell, you could even have your Scourges and Renegades if it really came down to it, right? You know, I think the projectile hate and projectile blocking is inevitable in World vs. World just because of the way the game works, right? You know, Shield 5, whatever, right? Like, you can't really get rid of it. But I think what you can do is like make Virtuoso better. And I think like freeing up that third trait line as like a utility, changing your profession mechanic trait line solves a lot of the issues that it has.
Hear me out.
Okay, I'm ready.
What if they give Reflex an ICD? Just a small one. But guess what other problem that solves outside of World versus World? You can't one-shot Lupicus anymore.
Oh, yeah, the dungeon focus. I like it.
I mean, that's an important thing to care about right now. Yeah.
It is. Like, if you... I mean, it's important for me. I love dungeons. But if you could... If you gave it, like, a small... Like, maybe, like, a fourth of a second or something. I don't know. That would just like, solve a lot of problems, I feel.
Like Ranger 2, Bow 2.
Yeah. It just cuts out, like, half of them. That's fine.
All right.
It's okay. Because Reflects are the most broken... Reflect is the most broken mechanic in the entire game.
It's pretty good. Okay, how many times can something get reflected back and forth before the projectile goes away?
I think like 3?
I believe
2 or 3?
You can reflect the reflected projectile, but I believe the reflected projectile won't reflect again. So in other words...
if you shoot...
If you shoot and it gets reflected, it will get bounced off your reflect, but it won't get reflected back to you. It will just go away.
So there we go. If you're doing... It's great for World vs. World then if they're both running reflect.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, apparently it just gets destroyed. No, it just gets destroyed. Only once. Yeah, no, you can't like do infinite chains. I thought you could do a bounce, but I guess not. Unlucky. That was
you can do a bounce though. I'm pretty sure. So Grimjack, fact check me on this one. But the Husk boss in COE Path 3, I think, that one, if you shoot into its thorns, it will send projectiles at you, and then I think you can reflect those projectiles back. But nothing happens if it hits the thorns again. I may be wrong. It's been a while.
Yeah, but isn't that
it's
like
a new projectile? Oh, so when you shoot into it, a new projectile comes out of it.
Oh, the wiki says you can be reflected twice. Dude, look, no one knows what's going on. We're all completely bamboozled.
Well, if things you can get reflected twice, doesn't that just solve Virtuoso for World vs. World if you're with people with reflects?
No. No, I don't know. I mean, it is interesting to bring up something like this. Maybe reflect actually is broken. Like maybe reflect only. I mean, no. I mean, seriously though, like this is. I think bringing in new specs like this, maybe having a mechanic that polarizing isn't good. Maybe it should only reflect, say, 10 projectiles. So if you put feedback up, right, or wall of reflection, maybe it should only do 10 blocks, right? The issue is, what do you do with like channeled skills though? Like what do you do with like Shield 5 on Guardian? Does it just get cancelled after after a few reflects or something like that?
Here's something actually cool. That there's this kind of indie game series that some of you may not be aware of, but it's called Pokemon. And there's light screen and reflect in that game, and then they added a move called Brick Break, where you could like specifically it would proc if someone had used like a barrier effect and it would break the barrier.
You're saying unblockable skills.
No, I'm saying like fucking like Heaven's Palm or whatever on Willbender. What if that destroyed like the enemy wall of reflect? What if you have skills that like break reflects down?
That's a great idea.
Virtuoso could be the first one. Maybe it throws its daggers at it, and its daggers are so fucking pointy that it just destroys the reflect.
Maybe that's the solution to the elite skill that it currently has.
Yeah, that would be actually really fucking cool.
Yeah. If the elite skill, which is right now, I mean,
Well,
definitely not usable in PvP. But if the elite skill also destroyed whatever reflects are up before it shot its daggers or something.
I don't know. I think that's I think that mechanic is that I think that just makes the problem even worse because then you've got this you've got this insanely polarizing mechanic then, right? Like if you have only this can do this exact effect, that's a really strong effect. I think that's good. I think you could have a trait that I think
isn't that what the warrior does in World vs. World right now?
Yeah, but that's not good though, is it? That's real. That Winds is one of the Winds is one of the most like hell skills to balance out there. It's like super mandatory because of like how the effect is unique and it's also a very powerful unique effect. It's kind of the same thing that ArenaNet wanted to deal with stuff like banners and druid, right? Grace of the land, banners, spirits, because like these mechanics are so strong and unique to this exact profession, nothing can replicate them, that it becomes a really big issue to have something like this in the game. So I think that's really scary. I think the way you can look at it, right? Deadeye has the only ability that removes reveal. Yeah, but that's not good. Like it makes Deadeye really AIDS and like kind of unfun. And also that's not actually as impactful or like game breaking as like Winds of Disenchantment or like destroying reflects. By the way, like yeah, you have like unique mechanics on Deadeye and some other things, but it's not as like game breaking or like meta warping or something like that. I like okay. I'm boring. I would just say you give a trait to psionics that makes them unblockable instead. So psionics are unblockable, right? And then, so here's the bottom line: we've killed the Conley trait line. That shit's fucking dead. We have one trait that makes your blade songs. You have like you still have like the blade generation. You have one thing that generates blades somehow. Maybe like whenever you use. Oh no, whenever you do something like you can generate blades, but then also you have one trait that makes it so your blade songs are half range and ignore projectile destruction, and then another trait that makes it so that you have one trait that does something to daggers to make it more usable in World vs. World, one trait that makes psionics unblockable and reduces the cooldown or something like that, and then one trait that makes it so that your probably the GM trait makes it so that your blade songs are half range, but they also just ignore projectile destruction or something like that. Like that would be like, there you go. Like I have now changed the bottom trait line, got rid of that Condi mess, right, and replace it with utility things that are basically the World vs. World trait line. There you go.
Yeah.
Boom.
I mean, I don't hate it.
Yeah. So I just think that like ArenaNet they've had a bad track record with Chrono. Like, what are we going to do here? Like, distortion share, dodging all the time with Mirage, like having to remove one dodge, right? I think they probably wouldn't be overly keen on giving Mesmer another, like, really, like, base game-breaking mechanic. Like, oh yeah, you can destroy reflects now, by the way. I'm not...
Well, they could give it to other stuff, too.
Unblockable projectiles basically destroys reflects, but for yourself only.
Well, right. Yeah, and this is what I mean. This is why I think having something that will destroy reflects would be bad, because in a way, like you're fixing the problem by introducing another one. Like, what is our issue? Our issue is reflect is very polarizing, and it's a very polarizing mechanic, right? So our solution should not be add another really polarizing mechanic, right? If that makes any sense. So
I feel like unblockable projectiles is a polarizing mechanic.
It is, but it doesn't like completely invalidate the reflect. It just means that it is very strong for you. And ArenaNet recognizes as well, actually, because funnily enough, they change unblockable. Like, it's not permanent now. It's like a number of attacks become unblockable, as opposed to like you're unblockable for 4 seconds. Yeah, ArenaNet, like, yeah, that is too polarizing. That actually isn't good because it was that strong. So they made it so that, oh yeah, you have a certain number of stacks of unblockable, and these stacks actually expire when you actually land attacks. But yeah, no, I mean, unblockable is a really scary mechanic. There's a reason why it's not in the game that much, because yeah, I think unblockable is actually one of the scariest things in the game, which is probably why there is no unblockable trait for Virtuoso right now, just because of how scary it really is.
You're unblockable for how many stocks you have. The daggers.
Hey, I
Hey,
like it.
there we go. Easy. Darkbringer, let's get on it.
Ooh.
That's not bad, actually. I like
Actually
that
pretty
idea.
solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. It's a really interesting one because I actually really agree with you guys. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great point about Reflect, to be honest. Maybe Reflect actually should be adjusted. That does makes Matthias really weird. Do you think they could do it in PvP only, not PvE? Or do you think it should happen in PvE as well? Because if you do it in PvE, that's kind of weird, right? Like, well, I guess it's exactly Matthias that it would be unusual with.
Just make him attack slower.
Yeah, or like because otherwise you but he has 20 stacks. Would you just reduce the number of stacks he has?
Give him
So
10 stacks.
10 stacks. All right. Okay. Yeah. They removed Unblockable Snipe Ranger because every Mesmer cried. It wasn't because of Mesmer crying, actually. It was because it was incredibly uninteractive to play against, right? like Sikkim Soul Beast. I mean, it's kind of an interesting build. But the problem is, it's just so fucking cancer. It's the same thing, right? In a way with like Reaper with Reaper with Lich form. Like the idea of Reaper like using the shout, the unblockable shout, and then like liching up and just auto attacking through your Aegis, through your block, through your reflect. Yeah, like that doesn't sound like very good game design to me, guys, right? I'm not sure about that one. Like, in general, I think you have to be really careful when you are removing counterplay from anything. Like, for example, like, could you add an attack that was undodgeable? Yeah, sure, you could.
There is.
There are. Absolutely. There's stuff like, wall attacks, like ward type attacks, right? Like, Guardian, like the rock wall on Ellie, on Staff, static field, right? Like this, undodgeable attacks, they do exist, but they're fucking terrifying, right? And you should really not, like, Herald F2, yeah, but I actually think that's not intentional, by the way. Like, Herald F2, yeah, it's fucking AIDS. Like, that should not be that way, by the way, but that's another thing entirely. That's like a bug. That's a bug. But yeah, there are a few undodgeable attacks in the game. But yeah, this is okay, right? But it has to be used very sparingly, and it's terrifying when you add it. And Unblockable is in the same category. Honestly, in the current meta right now, when there's a very low amount of stability in the game, you could even argue that ward type abilities would actually be very, very disruptive. And in a way, we're kind of lucky that they don't really exist in the current metagame. Like, you don't really see a lot of hammer guards in PvP, for example. But yeah, in the current meta, stuff like that is scary. And you know what? Do you want really great evidence on how scary undodgeable stuff is? Take a look at Dragon Hunter. Like, one of the reasons why Dragon Hunter was so potent in the meta was because it was very, very low stability. So you had, if you got hit by the trap, combining that with the stealth on Dragon's Maw, the sword port with the bug where you could like port the trap onto someone, this made it absolutely disgusting. It was very difficult to play against, and if you got caught, it was over, right? You were basically dead because you couldn't actually escape from the trap. So this is a bit of a tangent here, guys, but in general, removing counterplay from any ability ever should be done with extreme caution. It's a reason why stuff like Mantra of Pain got nerfed a lot, right? In terms of the damage it does, because it turns out having an ability that is functionally undodgeable, like a mantra, is really scary. And it's also why, in general, stuff like shouts, and honestly, mantras in general are a bit weird, because stuff like, oh, I can like spam Aegis on myself all the time, even when I'm stunned, or like, oh, like I can like spike you with like power spike and like destroy you. Yeah, it's probably not really that good to have stuff like this in the game. But there you go. There's my counterplay.
What do you think about Virtuoso's F2 ability?
This is something this is something that I have heard come up here, and I agree with this. It does really interest me because should Virtuoso actually have very different F skills? Because obviously right now it essentially is core Mesmer, but it's 1200 range, right? That's what it is. Like, you have the same abilities.
But F2 in particular, it does the thing where it comes back through the opponent, right? It comes back to you after hitting a wall or something.
Oh wait, do you mean Dagger 2? That's Dagger 2.
No, F2 I think it does that as well.
F2 just like they all fire at the same time. They like rear up behind you and then fire at the same time.
I think they come back as well, because you could stack like 40 stacks of confusion in one hit.
Oh yeah, this is a bug. Basically the projectiles do damage when they're like raising up into the air and firing. So if you stand in the hitbox of the target, it double hits. It's a bug.
Okay.
That's just a bug. All right. Okay. Yeah, the second dagger skill like goes out and then comes back.
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing Worm with that? Quadruple hitting?
Ooh.
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 You meta.
That's what they were saying, put on like 50 or 60 stacks of Torment, right?
Confusion.
Like,
Confusion.
Yeah, confusion. That's right.
Yeah. So you get nice little 6k procs of confusion in PvP. It's pretty good.
Do you know the worst part about it is that you can do that and it's still garbage, right?
Yeah, I know, it's true. It's true because you have to be inside the hitbox. If they move like anywhere, you can't do it. And yeah, and it's only like what 2 seconds of confusion, so they just don't attack for 2 seconds, and then you're good.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird meme, right? It's a bit of an unusual one, but yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the issue with this is that I guess Willbender almost suffers from this too, because it's not it doesn't really have any Condi built in, and like losing the passive means it doesn't do Condi damage. So in a way, that's why there's no Condi trait there. So maybe you just say, you know what, Virtuoso gets something else on its F2 that does something else. Maybe even something that I don't know, like okay, imagine if you gave it a mobility skill on its F2 or something like that. So like F2, you jump on the blade and like ride it forwards or something like that instead, right? Or you shuffle the skills around. So you have like 2 damaging ones. So you have like the power damage F1 and the stun daze blade on the F3. Then you have your block. Then you maybe have some other kind of utility instead of it actually doing condition damage.
Yeah. Since Virtuoso was first shown, I have been a proponent for putting more mobility onto it somehow, just because of the fact that you lose the illusions and all you have is daggers now. So nothing really distracts people from attacking you and not your illusions anymore, even though it's debatable at how much defense you actually get from having illusions. But yeah, I feel like this spec always needed more mobility in order to make up for that, and it just didn't give you any.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be an interesting way to go there. And I think that would also give it more of an identity away from core. Like, one of the really core complaints with Virtuoso is that it feels like core Mesmer a lot. Like, the playstyle is very similar, particularly in PvE. I don't think that's necessarily the case in PvP, but I can definitely grant that certainly when you take it as a whole, as a package, it is... You know, you don't really alter your playstyle that much in certain regards, because the abilities are the same, but they have 1200 range, right? And I think this goes back into the thing we were talking about earlier about encounters not really rewarding you for having 1200 range or like longer range abilities. And dude, people are sleeping on this. Everything on Virtuoso is 1200 range. It's basically like Scourge in a way, except 1200 instead of 900, right? Like, it's actually really long range the entire time. It's just that I guess there's no real place for that to shine, I suppose. So maybe that's another thing that you can kind of build into, like have some encounters that really reward you for having range damage and being a ranged DPS. And then give it maybe a little bit of mobility on the F2, like you said. So like redesign the F2, like move it away from having any kind of condition damage on it and say, yeah, this is a power spec. Because, I don't know, what do you think about this, Boots? I feel like when you're designing an elite spec, you should probably have like a pretty kind of broad role for it in mind, like most of the time, right? Oh, you know, it's Harbinger, it's a Condi support spec. It's Willbender, it's a power damage roamy thing, right? And then Virtuoso, it's a ranged power damage duelist thing, right? I think it's pretty cool, right? That kind of makes sense to me. Like you have this... You have like a general idea of what you want it to be. There can be some exceptions here. For example, I think Weaver is a pretty good exception here in a way, because Weaver is obviously this is a very damage-oriented spec, right? Like, you know,
I think Elementalist can never be either power or Condi because it always has the four attunements. It always has to have the ability.
Yeah. It kind of has to have that, yeah, because it's always going to have Condi because of just, you know, fire and earth. It's going to have burning. It's going to have bleeding on it, right? So yeah. Unless, well, who knows, right? With what's coming up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there are ways they can fix that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think Virtuoso kind of lacks that. It lacks that strong identity. And this is because of how conservative the design was, I suppose, right? And, you know, it's funny because it is by far the flashiest, right? You've got all these crazy animations, right? All these pink projectiles all over the place. It looks awesome. But in a way, it just feels like all style, no substance to a certain extent. You know, it's like,
if you look back at the past ones, like, so for Mesmer, you had Chronomancer, which was a, you know, tanky boon-giving guy, but it's power. It's a power spec. And then...
sometimes.
I mean, okay, fine, with the rework of Chaos and all that, yeah. But And then Mirage is definitely Condi. You kind of don't do a power spec with Mirage, right?
Yeah.
I think in a way Mirage was intended to yeah, I mean maybe a little bit. I think they wanted it to a little bit, but yeah, certainly primarily Condi with the axe weapon there in particular.
So they could have gone either way with Virtuoso. So they didn't have to do a power spec. They didn't have to do a Condi spec. They could have chosen one, done both. They pretty much had the world at their fingers when designing it. I don't know what I would have wanted as a Mesmer, Like, what would you have wanted from a Virtuoso spec?
Well, this is what I mean. I think, Necro is slow and tanky, so you give it something fast and glassy. Guardian is slow and fat and has built-in group support, so you give it something that's selfish and fast, right? Like, I think that Willbender is the anti-Guardian, and Harbinger is the anti-Necro, so that makes sense to me. What Mesmer lacks is it lacks, like, well, essentially something that would function in world versus world, like as an actual build. It's like a brawler, like almost like a bit of a kind of almost like a bit of a bruiser to a certain extent, where it actually has the ability to really get in there and have some proper cleave. Like it lacks cleave a lot of the time, sustain cleave. It has like burst cleave, shadows are all AoE, so like greatsword exists, right? And you can AoE people with that, but it lacks that sustained cleave, which is why I was actually predicting they would give it hammer, right? Like to have hammer so you can really like get in there and smash stuff, right? I think what Virtuoso, and this is why I always kind of come back to this idea that Virtuoso was supposed to be very world versus world oriented, because exactly that. That's the one thing that Mesmer lacks. I think Mesmer works in PvP. You've got Mirage, and even base Mesmer that has a semi-functional build. In PvE, you've got a damage dealer, you've got support, you've got Condi DPS with Mirage, right? All this kind of stuff. You have functional builds, but in world versus world, it just lacks a true spot in...
At least a lot of your Blade songs pierce, though, right?
They pierce, but they're all going to get reflected.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, it's funny, and this is why I'm so certain about this, because they were very careful with the way the traits work. If you, for example, you have the boon removal in Domination, right? Shattered concentration. So when you shatter, you remove a boon. That actually removes one boon per blade, right? That you fire. So in other words, it's in 5 boon removal on 5 targets that pierces. That is like, oh my god, that screams world versus world at you, right? Particularly seeing as it has a 10 second, it's quite a short cooldown, right? For world. So it's like, whoa, this is actually a really big boon pressure thing that Mesmer already has a bit of with Nullfield, but you could like dial that up to 11, right? And then be like a proper DPS spec, because I really want to underline this, guys. I'm not saying that Mesmer is bad in World vs. World. It actually isn't. It's a core part of the meta. You take it for Illusion of Life, Portal, Veil, right? Nullfield, Gravity Well, Focus Pulls, right? All that kind of stuff. You have useful stuff you can do on it. But the thing is, it isn't a build. You're a collection of abilities, right? Which is not a cohesive build. It's not like Scourge. It's like very, everything on Scourge makes sense and works, right? Everything on Guardian works. It's just all together, right? It has this very, role that it performs. Like Chrono is literally like, yeah, your utility skills are pretty good, I guess. So I guess you can join us, right? And then people tip, sometimes lead on it. And I think that isn't satisfying to play. I think a lot of Mesmer players don't want that. And honestly, surely ArenaNet's got to be aware of this, right? It's honestly like a meme that like Thieves Rangers get like fucking smushed, like get kicked out of groups all the time, get bullied hardcore. So that's why it makes sense to me. And particularly seeing as, listen, did you hear this, Boots? Did you hear that World vs. World is now a trademarked cornerstone game mode, right? For Guild Wars 2? I mean, come on. It just makes sense. All along. It's got to make sense. World vs. World, Mesmer, Virtuoso. And fix that, and then bam, perfect spec. Nice.
Yeah. World versus World with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
I'm starting this series.
Yeah.
Honestly, to be honest with you guys, so she played Guild Wars 2 for like the first 2 years of the game, basically. And I think she stopped playing when World vs. World Seasons stopped.
Oh.
Because she liked World vs. World Seasons. So if World vs. World Seasons comes back, she might come back to the game.
Oh, dude. I don't want to overdose on copium too much, but I don't know. I think alliances could actually be really juicy. Like real juicy, I think, for the game. Because, New World is coming out. Again, we're going on the TeaTime tangent here, guys. I'm just going to honestly, like, look, we know we we're talking about it, guys. Like, it's TeaTime. What do you guys expect? But New World's coming out, which is a Realm v Realm game. But honestly, New World, it's not done, and it won't be done when it comes out. It's not done, and honestly, it won't be done for another year. Guild Wars 2 is done. right? You know, like the systems are actually really good in this game. They're really well polished. The combat is fun to play. Even right now, even though I know that World vs. World doesn't have like a real reason to win or like particularly, you know, like the systemically World vs. World kind of suffers a little bit. Like when they bring alliances, that will actually make World vs. World a very complete package, I think, actually, with the way it works. You know, with rewards, purpose, and meaning. I don't know, man. Like this could be so big.
If you buy into it, like alliances will only work if the World vs. World community and the exterior of the World vs. World community tries to buy into it. Because right now, World vs. World is there because people like it, but at the same time, people who don't really get into it that much can still just pop in whenever they want and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And get harassed for taking up spots.
Sure, yeah. And get killed while trying to kill the hyena. But honestly, alliances is a great idea, and I hope it works. And I'm going to support it as much as I can. But it relies so much on the player base buying into it for it to work, and I hope that happens.
Yeah, I think that's always the vulnerability of a very player-driven game mode, right? It is so dependent on the players and if they're going to go for it. And yeah, I you know, I don't know. The World vs. World community, they can be a bit curmudgeonly sometimes, but I don't know. Maybe we can be optimistic about it. I'm sure they'll give it a try because you know I think they really like the game. You know, the World vs. World players are some of the most loyal players in the game, right? And I think that if they're kind of given that opportunity to shine and given that opportunity to you know show that they are worth having around, then I'm sure they will be very well behaved there as well. But yeah, I mean seriously, I think it'd be so big for the game because you know like I was saying, outside of New World, what kind of like big realm versus realm, like open world PvP game actually is there? And it's got even more. Like if you rage quit World vs. World, you can go and do the other stuff as well. But I just think that a lot of people really like the idea of realm v realm PvP. You know, like open world PvP. But like what game is going to provide that? Like New World, yeah, sure, that's going to be fun, I think. But I think people are worried about New World killing Guild Wars 2 World vs. World. Now that I'm hearing about alliances, I'm actually scared for New World. Seriously, I am not fucking around. I'm not. This is not hopium, guys. Okay, I'm banning everyone who puts hopium. Right? Yeah, I am not joking, dude. I actually think alliances are way more of a threat to New World, and World vs. World is more of a threat to New World than New World is to Guild Wars 2 at this point. Simply because of like how far along the game is and how much there is in Guild Wars 2. Like it's super interesting to me. Yeah, you know, like dude,
Guild Wars 2 has a 10-year advantage.
Dude, holy shit. Colin made New World just to like raise the eyebrows of all of the Realm v Realm players and then left the project to come back to Guild Wars 2 knowing that the game wasn't finished and might lose a lot of players over time. And then bam, they release alliances just as the New World hype is wearing off. By the way, guys, this is a big conspiracy. Grouch was also working at Amazon on New World and stuff like that. This is actually big. This is 5D chess, guys. No, actually, no. This is 32nd dimensional chess. They've developed an entire game with Jeff Bezos' money just to funnel into World versus World.
And they somehow convinced Jeff Bezos to go into space. It was impressive.
That is actually false, by the way, DeAndre. Colin did work on New World. The Crucible team did go to New World afterwards. And Grouch was head of competitive, which was Crucible, but also regarding New World as well. So that is actually false. Bonus meme. Nice. Okay. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
I think we were talking about Jeff Bezos last.
Yeah, going into space.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did go into space. And now he'll come to Guild Wars 2. That would be, dude, imagine that. If he starts streaming on Twitch.
Guild Wars 2 in space.
And
Guild Wars 2 in space. I got into the stream. Yes.
Yeah. I like it. That was sabotaging the competition. That is indeed wicked. I love to see it. Like really bringing the pain there. But yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. I'm very, it's a bit of a tangent there. Just, that thought kind of popped into my head there, talking about alliances and, the nature of the game. And honestly, this is why I really think they'll do this. I think that Ellie might have a similar thing, right? Like, get like a brawler role for PvP. I think that a lot of the elite specs are going to fill in gaps in the toolkit there as well. I think, Ellie's going to be a brawler. Ranger's going to be a brawler. Maybe even Thief has like a supportive role. I mean, like, I am boom on Support Thief. Cool. Support Thief is going to kick in 100% because I think they want to make every profession have like a rock solid role in a big World versus World Zerg. Because it turns out in roaming, every profession actually has roaming builds. Weirdly enough, like you can duel on literally anything, pretty capably in World versus World. It's just where the kind of core meat of World versus World is where a lot of the diversity falls down a little bit in terms of what professions are going to be effective in large scale play. And like, listen, guys, I'm sorry for the 3 people who still roam in this game, but yeah, like the core of World versus World is large scale PvP, or like medium large, so like 10 plus basically. That's the core of World versus World. It's not really like running around in circles chasing each other down on thieves, right? That's there you go. But yeah, Cinder is going to enjoy support thief. He's going to love it. He's going to love it.
Renji and I talked about the new thief spec. He thinks it will be some kind of spec where you have a ranged one-handed weapon. I don't know that I really want to say what it is. Can I say what it is? Or what Renji thinks it will be?
I mean,
I wish it was Mace.
You can speculate. You can speculate, Brazil. You can
We were
say maybe
speculating.
that. You can say maybe. Imagine if Thief got this weapon, for example. You can make an educated guess, if you will.
Yeah. we were speculating that it has a scepter, and that the build is like having magic ink, and it draws like
Ooh.
symbols and characters in the air,
Oh.
and things come out of it, and it manifests.
God.
It's a graffiti artist.
Yep. It goes in with the thief, like the thief spec right there, like the thief profession roleplay. You just commit crime.
Yeah,
Like,
he said he.
It was first revealed in the reveal trailer of the original Guild Wars 2 reveal trailer.
My god, the guy with the spray paint who's like
guy with the spray paint in the
your
left
what was it
hand
like?
trailer.
What was it? Wait, was it like our time is now or some shit?
Yeah.
Oh,
Our
God.
time is
Why
now.
would you even remind me about that, man?
Now is our time. Now is our time. Graffiti thief.
Vandal, dude. You just go around and like commit various forms of property crime, like like you burn stuff down and you graffiti everything. I like that. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, dude! This is a very, very this is incredibly off topic. I'm just I'm right now. I'm in Verdant Brink, guys, and I'm watching the frog.
Oh, I gotta
right?
see.
I'm watching the frog, and dude, people lose to the frog a lot. Okay,
Yeah,
like,
they
the
get
frog,
farmed.
just as like Nike was right, man. People get farmed by the frog so hard. Actually, this is the true end boss. Look, he's won. The frog has actually secured victory here. It's over. I'm just watching it live on stream. Like they're actually forced to respawn. Like they're literally like they die and they keep it in combat, and then they have to immediately respawn to try and face the frog again before it regens because they just cannot actually handle it. Like the frog is too powerful.
It's old Lupicus in dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
Old Lupicus, you just waypoint Zergum.
Frog KDA. The frog KDA is high, man. Like the frog is just
They
destroying.
probably have
right
data
now.
on that. No,
Wait, what?
I would love to see that.
The stats on
It's
the
on
frog?
his.
Yeah.
Oh, someone probably knows what they are. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, Nike's been watching a lot, but I think we need like the Chris Cleary one, right? Because he would give stats about the game sometimes, like how many times people died to sloth.
No,
No,
those
the stat I want to know
stats.
is how many
Those
times the frog has killed people rather than been killed. I want to see that.
We need more stuff like the that adventure in Drizzlewood where you have to 1v1 that Spirit of the Wolverine or something like that. We need that. We need the ability that you have to 1v1 the frog as part of the story or something like that, as part of an
The
activity.
hammer
Oh,
boss.
man.
Yeah.
The hammer boss.
Yeah, wait. Is that like which hammer boss?
Was that not you? Do you not remember that? Who was it that we talked about that on something? So, oh my god, there was a Reddit post. Like it's probably been like 4 years ago at this point. And someone was complaining about the hammer boss being too hard. And everyone's like, what hammer boss are you talking about? And they're like, the level 5 human personal story quest hammer boss. It does too much damage and too much CC. They couldn't deal with it, and they made a Reddit post saying like, "I've been fighting this boss for hours, and I'm so frustrated."
Oh, no.
Like, this is why Necromancer, like, this is why Harbinger trait lines are what they are. This is the reason. See, we want different things, but they'll never be different. Yeah, Big Nose Ted. That's it.
Oh no. Yeah, that is unfortunate. Okay, that is indeed very, very unfortunate. Poor little Peepo struggling with Big Nose Ted. It was like that with Path of Fire, right? With the Eater of Souls. Like, I think there were like a lot. Yeah,
Yes.
people were like big mad, dude. Like, it wasn't like one guy. It was like a lot of people who got like hard stuck, right? Like hard stuck on like the Eater of Souls, I think, or whatever it's called. And they could never get out of the underworld. They were just trapped there forever, which is like farm people constantly. That was quite something. But anyway, Virtuoso, guys. I think we did kind of summarize a lot of the issues with the Virtuoso, I think, right? Like in general, we talked about a good amount of its problems, like where it could be good, like where it should be good in our opinion. There's one thing I want to talk about. Like, okay, so let's suppose we fixed blade songs so they actually become either you trade it so it makes it like just ignore projectile destruction, or it just is baseline, or whatever. You turn them into like beams or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. What about Dagger? What do you do to Dagger? Because obviously it kind of suffers from the same issue. And yeah, you could play. Suppose we're in a world versus world Zerg. We're probably playing Focus offhand because Focus is very good, right? And we like, that's pretty good to pull people in. And I guess you play Greatsword because you have some boon removal on it and stuff, and like a CC, so that's kind of useful, I guess. And unblockable, Mirror Blade. But then, what other main hand do you take? I mean, you could take Sword for mobility, right? You can like leap around, I guess, which is kind of cool.
I want Dagger 3 to be, instead of just that slow-moving Blade Storm, it's like a kind of like a Greatsword 3 on Warrior, where it's a Blade Storm, but it's you, the Blade Storm, and you move.
Oh, so you move like in a line, but it's kind of slow, isn't it? So wouldn't you have to speed up?
You go fast, obviously.
Yeah, you'd make it go fast, and then you have to move with it. Okay.
Like Tornado.
Like Tornado, yeah.
But how do we solve the kind of projectile-based nature? Do you think it's okay that it still has projectiles? Or would you make it so that, again, there's like another trait that makes it so that it kind of circumvents that? Although I feel like at that point, you're just making the same trait 3 times. Would you make the Grandmaster? Wait, what if you made the Grandmaster ability, like you half the range on dagger skills and blade songs, but they both become immune to projectile destruction? You just like have like a massive, like huge one, like a massive crazy trait. That would make
the adept trait that says when you're within 600 feet, you 15% extra damage. That would make it more sense.
Synergy. Yeah, then you've got synergy there, right? Yep. Yeah, so you have a trait that makes it unprojectile-y. Because as of right now, I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is just my role playing. I'm like RPing hardcore right now, but I think it would be kind of cool to use Dagger in World vs. World, like to have like the elite spec weapon of Virtuoso be used in World vs. World. But maybe that's unnecessary, because I mean it would still see a lot. It's still going to see play in PvE, and you still use it for PvE right now because it does some good damage. I like the flavor on the little auto attack, by the way, where you send if you get 3 in a row, you get like pew pew pew. I think that's kind of cool. I like that actually. That's fun. But is it actually okay to have a trait that would do that much though, like Dagger and Blade songs? Like, or something like that. I guess you could actually make it really general. What you could even go as far to say that all of your projectile attacks have half range, but they can't be destroyed or something like that. That would be like a really, really interesting trait. But would that actually fuck everything up? That would be super weird with pistol, right? Because then pistol you can't.
Yeah, I don't think that would work.
that might be too dynamic, right? Like maybe a little bit too much. Yeah.
I think maybe you do one trait, like a master trait that affects your dagger skills like that, and then a grandmaster trait that affects your blade songs like that, maybe. Or vice versa. You have 2 traits that do it in different ways.
Yeah. But then isn't that kind of the same trait that occupies the same design
space?
Well,
they do, on top of that, they do other things.
Oh.
Or if you want to be fun, you could make them have trade-offs as well.
Well, I think they should have trade-offs. But I think that if you were going to have a trait that is like, okay, this trait enables you to work in World versus World, I almost think you want to bundle it instead of having 2 that do kind of the same thing, but for one.
I would say probably the Blade Song one wouldn't have the 600 range trade-off. I'd say the Dagger one would, because the Blade Songs they have pretty high cooldowns.
Yeah.
Like.
But I think there has to be a trade-off for basically being immune to projectile destruction.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong effect. I think trade-offs are in a way they're kind of thematically interesting too. So it really changes the playstyle, and I think a good way to do that is trade-off. So it's kind of semi-unblockable, but you have to be a bit up close and personal to actually use it.
Yeah,
and then you synergize with that 15% trait there as well, which kind of makes that trait a bit more interesting inherently. So I think that will be a way to go. But I think the real question is that what do you do with dagger? Like, do you bundle dagger into that? Would be a very impactful trait if you were to do that. And it was like, okay, wait, actually, the blade songs, do they count as blades? They do, right?
Yeah, I want to say yeah. Here, I'll
Yeah,
take a look.
I can't quite think if they actually count as like full blades right now. Like you could make it actually focus on blade abilities.
It's a blade.
Yeah, okay. So you could basically say blade abilities cannot be destroyed, essentially, is what you could do. Right?
Yeah.
And that makes it simpler. Because wait, the dagger abilities are blades, right? Too, I think.
Not all of them, or maybe all of them. Hold on, let's take a look.
Yeah, here we go. Let's do it, guys. Right, let's go ahead and look at it. Let's go on the wiki just to double check that we're not big dum here, right? Guys, I'm never going to die to the frog, by the way. I would destroy the frog 1v1. And honestly, I've done it as well. Well, look, you can look at my boon nodes. They are blades. Okay, then in that case, I would just say that blade, just say, isn't that kind of a really neat, elegant way of doing it? Blade abilities have half range, but they can't be destroyed.
It solves my issue of not having enough interaction with the blades.
Yeah, because if you just have, you could even actually make a block of 3 traits all interact with blades in some way, but do different things, right? You could have like this one makes them do this one makes them do this one makes them do that, right? So they enable very different playstyles off the basis of that. So I think that would actually be a really good way to actually do that. So you make them undestroyable. Great has blade skills. Yeah, it does, but I think that's fine. Like I think it's just the isn't it just the mirror blade? I don't think it's the other ones. And even if it is the other ones, that's fine too, right? Half and 600 range, 900 range. Yeah, you could maybe compromise at that, but I mean, then you're playing with numbers, right? You're playing with numbers at that point.
What if it retains its range, but the trait is your blade songs are unblockable when you are within 300 range?
Ooh, yeah, okay. I think then you've got a bit of okay, yeah. But then again, I'm worried that the scope of that trait might be a little bit too large at that point.
Yeah.
Because then it's kind of like
definitely a Grandmaster though. Definitely a Grandmaster.
Yeah. That would definitely be worthy of being a GM. I think this is the kind of thing you could play with, right? A little bit, but I think the idea is good, and we're kind of just trying to work out the details. Where I think in general, I think the broad concept is the important thing here, is that what can we do to actually enable it in the game mode that I think it's supposed to be in, I guess. So there it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we went over everything. So overall impressions though, what do you guys think?
Good.
I know I've roasted them a fair bit and complained a lot. My overall impression is actually overwhelmingly positive, because if we live in a world where every elite spec was designed with the philosophy that clearly went into Virtuoso, Harbinger, and Willbender, I think Guild Wars 2 is amazing. Like, I really like the philosophy that I'm seeing here. There's a few quibbles I have, particularly around the trait design, I think is not good. But in terms of design, in terms of profession mechanics, I think these are some of the most pure elite specs we've ever seen. An elite specialization. What is an elite specialization? It's something that is a side grade from the original profession, right? Like, you know, Reaper is a side grade from Core Necromancer. And, well, so is Scourge in theory. But, you know, and I think Willbender, Harbinger, and Virtuoso actually fulfill that role and fulfill that definition better than anything we've seen before, actually. Outside of, you know, funny enough, actually Reaper, because I think Reaper is really well designed. And maybe Soul Beast. I give Soul Beast a high rating as well, actually. But in terms of the design, yeah, I actually think that they are really, really fucking solid. And nerfing the current design that exists right now, bringing that a little bit more in line, and buffing the numbers up. The numbers are low on these specs, outside of DPS, obviously. Like, let's not talk about that. But yeah, adjust the numbers, and I think that we've got one hell of a design philosophy here, and it gives me a huge amount of enthusiasm and excitement. Even though these ones are not directly my playstyle, they're more DPS oriented, I like support stuff, but still, very hyped, actually. Very, very happy with the way that the skills team has gone about designing them.
Yeah, I kind of agree. There's a few things on each of them that I definitely want, like pet peeve things that I kind of want changed. but nothing about the specs makes me not like the specs overall. Like they're fun. The Willbender looks like it will be fun to play when it gets reworked a little, not reworked, but like changed a little bit. The animation sped up a little bit. Virtuoso. I mean, to be fair, I'm kind of like Brazil. I've never been a huge fan of playing Mesmer, so like I don't have this huge amount of enthusiasm to playing Virtuoso, but it looks like it should be fun anyway. And Harbinger is just it's already fun to play. So yeah, I like them.
Yep. I think like for me personally, like I think Harbinger they like pretty much just knocked out of the park. Willbender is something that like I've always just wanted. Like I love it. I think it's great. For me, it's a home run. Virtuoso is pretty okay. I think it's pretty okay. I think it's pretty okay.
Pretty okay. Not bad, not bad. Yeah, I mean, on that note, just to quickly clarify something, guys, I want to be super clear about this. Elite specializations were not designed to be mandatory. They were actually very much supposed to be side grades. Like, if you go back and look at the original videos and documentation where ArenaNet talk about this, they were supposed to be, you can only have one of them because obviously having more than one thing that changes your profession mechanic doesn't make any sense, really. But no, they were never supposed to be better, right, than core. That obviously didn't work out that way. The thing is, they were pretty much direct upgrades from core a lot of the time, but that was not the intention. And you can actually see this reflected in the way that ArenaNet is balancing the game now, because ArenaNet is trying to make core better. They are buffing these core specs to be more playable. Particularly, you see this kind of coming back in PvP rather. You have stuff like Core Guardian is pretty good. Core Necro is pretty good, right? There's a lot of these things that are making their grand return there as they get tuned up over time. And you also see them do this. And actually, this is a design that I really like. Again, this is a little bit off topic, but in a way, what they're trying to do, they're actually trying to make every trait line a little bit like an elite specialization. They're giving each trait line a gimmick. For example, marksmanship on Ranger has opening strike. Tactics on Warrior has Soldier's Focus. Corruption has this Invoke Torment, right, whenever you swap legends on Revenant. Explosives has Explosive Entrance and the Explosion modifier. They are actually trying to make all of these different trait lines modify the way your profession operates in a subtle way, and then the elite specializations modify it in a more extreme way by fundamentally changing the mechanic. And to be honest, I can't wait until they've done that. We haven't had a real proper balance patch for a while now. Even these ones have been mostly like numbers tuning, which is a little disappointing, to be frank, but hey, they're pretty busy right now, and I'd rather that the game not be balanced super quickly rather than the specs just be terrible or completely broken. But yeah, that's the thing about elite specs, guys. That's how it's supposed to be. Boom.
Boom. We did it, guys.
Ban Scourge.
Ban Scourge? Just like delete it? I mean, how far are we going? And we just
Boots, I guess you didn't hear this, but I came up with an idea on how to balance Scourge. And that's whenever you log onto it, your POF product key is deactivated.
Ah, smart. I like it.
That's the way to fix it right there.
Yeah. So then you log onto it, and then it just deletes your Scourge.
Yes, it deletes your Scourge.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way, I think.
Simple but effective, Simple yet effective.
It's too much. We talk about it too much, but people also still don't get it. So
we do.
Who
knows
when to stop?
It is a really interesting one, actually. Like this whole dynamic, and funnily enough. This is another like side topic, and we should probably wrap this up fairly soon, actually. But I have recently really started thinking about balance and skill design a lot more because I know I'm bored, and I now have so much sympathy for the absolute like living hell that it must be to be a balance designer in literally any game, because you are fighting, against the tide to such an extreme degree with this, because you can make something really, really strong and really, really good, but if players don't value what it does really well, then no one's going to play it. Like, my favorite example of this is definitely Heal Ellie. Heal Ellie is so insanely overpowered right now in PvE, and people still don't play it. Like, I was chatting with Subi from QT on stream, and he flat out said, okay, that yeah, most groups should probably run Heal Ellie because of how hard it carries people, right, and like how strong it is, and people still don't run it. Like, it does not matter. Like, what this does, players in Guild Wars 2 like only value DPS. If a spec doesn't do DPS or add to group DPS in some way, it's considered to be complete garbage. And this is just like the absolute hell in my opinion, because what do you do as a balance dev in this situation? Like, what do you actually do? Like, if you add something to the game that is really strong, but people still don't play it, how do you actually fix it? Because, and Scourge is another example of this, now and not anymore, obviously, but when it did 29,000 DPS, it was actually insane. Like, it was like BIS. It was like one of the best things you could play, actually, in PvE, but you would get kicked from groups, or like, you know, you're not allowed to play because Scourge only did 29k DPS. Even though it did really well in terms of DPS on encounters because of DPS uptime, the old problems, they're still here, right? We need to call up Papa Nemesis and bring him back because, yeah, people still don't get it, right? They do not get it, like, at all. It's unbelievable. But I don't know. Like, what I mean, just as I guess a final topic.
Is that a problem with the people who are doing balance, or is that a problem with the people playing the game?
Well, this is what I mean.
People playing the game, I think.
Yeah, it's people playing the game. Yeah.
Because people, Heal Scourge is broken as hell everywhere, but people think it's only a class for Bone Skinner. People think you only play Heal Scourge at Bone Skinner when you can play it anywhere and it's still just as broken no matter where. And it's more broken. It's more broken the worse you are. Like, the worse your group is, or like the newer your group is. I don't want to necessarily say worse, because some people are just new and some people are still learning. But like, the less skill that is in your group, the stronger Heal Scourge get. But also, there's more opposition. The less, like, the lower the skill level is. Like, people aren't open to it because they think the way to succeed is DPS, and they're just dead set on it.
Yeah.
It's
hard to change that mentality.
Yeah, it's like
a really
it's like
popular
that
video.
The line from Fallout New Vegas where the doctor says, like, everyone has opinions, and the dumber people are, the more opinions they have. It's like stuff like that really resonates sometimes.
Yeah.
LOL.
Yeah.
LOL.
It's a bit tough because, you know, I think that even if ArenaNet makes some of this stuff really good, I think players will still probably avoid it. And it makes the game really hard to actually, it makes the devs' job very, very difficult. Like, if the player base doesn't understand the game, then it's really awkward, because a lot of the time it doesn't just come down to numbers. Like, there's so much more on what makes something strong than just having really high DPS. There's a lot that goes into it.
That's the PvE issue with balance and how people react to balance. But there's also a PvP issue with balance, which is, I think, boiled down to trying to make things that are as fun for people to play as possible, but as little, I'm not saying this properly, as little unfun to play against, you know? Like, make it as fun as possible to play, but people playing against it shouldn't have the worst time in the world, which is what happens with Scourge.
Yeah, funny enough, I actually think that's easier in a way. I mean, than actually making people play stuff. I think you actually don't suffer from this this much in PvP. Obviously, you have like people who whine about their class being bad, who are just shit and don't realize how good it is. Like, that does happen. But I actually think that, weirdly enough, the players actually tend to understand what is good and what is not in PvP a little bit better. I don't really know why, actually, either. It might be because roles are a bit more defined to an extent. Like, you have
get punished if you're not doing well.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot more obvious, like, if you're doing well or not, and like how much you're contributing when you play in PvP, right? Like, you know, if you're running around on Thief and killing everyone, right? So I was like, oh yeah,
hang on, I'll be right back.
I'm providing value. Or if you're like healing people a lot on guys, like, oh yeah, this is pretty good, right? You know, I'm obviously, you know, reviving people and healing people. Because I don't think it's the devs' fault with this. I mean, I think it's actually the community's fault with the PvE balance stuff, because the devs have actually created loads of really strong builds, right? That people just refuse to play because they just don't. And the reason they don't play them is because they just don't play them, right?
Is it because they don't have enough fun on
them? I'm not sure. I don't think so, because the thing I get a lot of the time is like, oh man, like, I wish I could play my heal Ellie. They come and say, dude, heal Ellie is so bad, and I wish I could play it. And I say, well, I've got great news for you. Heal Ellie, absolutely insane. God tier build. Or people come in here and say, oh man, I really wish, dude, I never see anyone play Hollowsmith. Why does no one play Hollowsmith? Because NG is actually the least played class, and Hollow, it does see some play, but not that much, to be honest. And it's like, wow. People just don't play this stuff. People don't play this stuff because they don't see other people play this stuff, if that makes any sense. And this is really, I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? But it's not very logical, right? Without sounding like a massive 150 IQ 5-head. It's not a very... Why would you join those two things together? Why would you just join the thing that no one plays this, therefore it must be unplayable, right? I mean, I guess I can kind of see why people might think that, but wouldn't you try and evaluate? Yeah, Boon Rev is a really good example. Dude, I even made a video and it didn't work, man. I made a video about Boon Rev saying how OP it is, and no one fucking plays that shit, dude. It's so good. Boon Rev.
Weird. Nobody plays auto attack.
It's weird.
Auto attack Earth Shield Ellie. It's weird. I don't know.
I made a video about Rifle Deadeye with infiltration runes, and everyone started playing it.
Yeah,
you guys are just bad salesmen. That's the problem.
Yeah. True.
That's I'm a good salesman.
In PvP either. I don't get it.
I could sell hair to a bald man.
Yeah, maybe it's. I mean, well, wouldn't that be an easy sale though?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe it just takes a little bit of time for this stuff to catch on. Hey, maybe the website launch, hardstuck.gg, will save the day. Who knows? Ooh, let's go. Maybe that will be effective. But I don't know. It's Boon will provide Boon that already have 100% uptime in raid. You haven't played many pugs then, have you? It really doesn't actually. Boon Rev is really strong. Particularly with the Firebrand meta, you actually really lack swiftness a lot of the time. A lot of the time you don't have permanent protection. You don't have a lot of permanent useful boons. And Boon Rev will prevent that. It also increases boon uptime for everything else as well. You should go watch my video on it. It's really good. And it increases group DPS as well. A lot, actually. It's very good. Right. Well, this is what I mean. The perception's there, but the thing is, people are making these decisions off bad information. And how is it that? How do the devs fix? How do the devs attack the bad information in the community? Right. And how? What's the actual solution to this? Because this is completely off topic, but it is. It's something that I've been really pondering. I've been pondering it a lot recently, actually.
It's multifaceted because here's the thing. The devs have not, ArenaNet in the past, I feel like historically, has not wanted to support the hardcore community because they've viewed the hardcore community as being toxic and elitist, which there's a degree of truth to that. And so that's put them in a scenario where the people that they have promoted, and I'm not saying these people are or aren't one way or the other, but the people that they have been promoted or that they have promoted get dogpiled and called Care Bears. And so anyone that ArenaNet promotes, if they promote Teapot, it's, shit. Guess we can't use Hardstuck because ArenaNet only promotes Care Bear casuals and I'm an elitist. I'm a good player. And so there's this hole that's been dug, and it hasn't just been dug by one person. And it's weird. And I don't know. I think they promoted Snowcrows one time in the launcher or something. Maybe there was a tweet, but it's just
they got roasted, by the way. They didn't get, there was so much backlash actually on Facebook in particular. People were like, "Whoa, how dare you tell us how to play the game?" What the fuck? It was actually really harsh. It was kind of sad to see actually that was the response. That happened there.
There are so many different places that this whole thing comes from, and at this point, I don't know that it's even worth worrying about consequences to any of it, because you have people that are angry and that want to fight on all sides. So, you should probably just look objectively at it and say, I think this will help the most people. People are going to complain, fuck them, let's just do it. I don't know, unless it interferes with your metrics and your engagement, and you've got to keep the people that are buying gems. I don't know the solution. It's a mess. I have a feeling that the people that are, funding the game are also the people that don't want to be told how to play by having Snowcrows guides posted on Facebook. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't mind going off on the community a little bit. I'm happy to do it. They don't seem to have a problem going off on me. So
it always really interests me. I think in a way people want their spec to be bad, right? And I know it's really, I know maybe it's wrong to actually suggest that people are acting in bad faith, because that's essentially what I'm saying there. But I think people actually want this stuff to bad just so they can complain about it. You know, they want to say, oh yeah, Necro is so trash. Oh no, it feels so bad to be a Necro gamer, right? Oh no, what are we gonna do? Right?
They like to have something to talk about, and having their class be bad is something to talk about.
Yeah,
Elliot, right now, Weaver, that's what's happening.
And you know what, dude? I just realized that's why they made the new elite specs bad, so everyone can complain about them.
Hey, perfect,
dude. I knew it. Okay, they made Virtuoso, like Willbender, Feedbender, right? Just so you can complain about how bad it is. And then they buff it, right? They buff it, and then everyone is filled with joy and happiness, right? They improve these specializations as we move on through debaters, and then go again. And actually, you know, on that note, actually, so you know how they're doing the beta, so we can kind of steer it back to the elite specialization beta. That, as I understand it, the next beta is not going to have Willbender, Virtuoso, and Harbinger in it. Do you guys think that's a mistake? Do you think they should actually add them back in?
I thought it was going to have 6, and then the last one would have 9.
So each of the first 3 betas have 3.
Yeah,
the 3 that you haven't had, and then the last one has all 9. So it's 4 betas total.
Yeah. So do you guys think they should actually like increment it so you have like 3, 6, 9, 9? Well, I guess that wouldn't. I guess that would make
I don't mind it the way they're doing it, because I think they want people to concentrate on the 3 they're releasing, so that you kind of concentrate on them and get as much feedback for those particular as you can. Yeah.
But that does, of course, give them less room to iterate, I guess.
It's true.
On those
last 3, the last 3 you're gonna have less time to iterate on.
Yes, I do have that. So in other words, basically they've got wait, when is the last one? It's in November. Yes, the final one is in November. So they have basically. Oh, actually, no. You know what? No, I take it back. I guess that makes sense, right? So they have now, say, 2 and a bit months now to act on the feedback they got on these 3, and then they can maybe change some stuff and then re-show the beta at the end of November, and then they have until the expansion to maybe like polish things up a little bit there too.
Yeah,
I guess it's all right. Yeah, all right, okay, all right, yeah, okay, all right, that makes sense. And then you can have like very focused betas in the in the next 2. All right, yeah, I get it. Yeah. Okay. I just got a little bit worried there, but now I've changed my mind. I think that's fine.
Don't worry, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, the developers know what they're doing, guys. They're very, very competent. It's why they couldn't decide if they were developing an expansion for a few years. That's how competent they really are. I feel that's a little harsh. Okay, I'm going a little bit like
might be a little bit.
I'm going a little bit 2015 TeaTime here. You know, a little old Brazil. You know, like it's almost, it's like Inks isn't here, so the Brazil juice has like gone onto me, right? Yeah, it's like yeah.
Oh, the Brazil juice. Ooh.
Well, I might be going over to your part of the world soon.
Ooh, I like that. You know, it's that's what it's all about, guys. You know, like on TeaTime, we're like the holy trinity, right? You have, a DPS, a healer and a tank. It's like that. There always has to be at least one Brazil, right? Like he's always here with us in spirit, and that's that's what happened to Inks, man. Like Brazil, he was off. He went to do other things, and then meanwhile, Inks, he decayed, right? He became, or maybe he ascended even to become the Brazil, and now he's not even here. Okay, I actually did invite Inks on the show, guys, but to have the original,
there can never be 2 Brazils on the same stream.
True, actually, yeah, that's big. The actual reason was he didn't play the elite specs, and therefore was not he was not around. Unlucky, guys. Very, very unfortunate indeed. Hate to see it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that actually just about wraps up. Unless there's something in specific that we missed. Did we miss anything in particular?
Maze Pistol Thief.
Oh, well, you guys were speculating. Maybe you could load the scepter into a pistol. Speculating, by the way.
I'm down. Yeah. I'm down. We could do it. As long as you can shoot something out of the damn pistol, I'm fine with it.
Bullets? Are bullets okay?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah. Okay, all right. I think that is about time to wrap it up. About now, guys. Actually, we can cover. We don't have to speculate on the new elite specs that are coming out. Okay, like we can talk about those when they actually arrive, which is very soon, by the way, right? Because we do, the next beta is going to be towards the end of September. And we actually can predict when they're going to announce this, funnily enough. Like, the next stream is probably going to be on the 17th of September. So it really isn't long, actually, because the next beta is 21st of September through the 25th, and they'll probably do the announcement the week before on the Friday once again. So yeah, it'll be on the 17th. And additionally, all the living worlds have been resuming, so we have a little bit of content while we wait there as well. So there it is. It's all looking good, guys. You know what? I'm going to say it. I haven't said it so far, guys. 2021 is the year of Guild Wars 2. Alliances beta, DX11 beta is coming very soon. Soon you'll be able to get 15 FPS instead of just 10, right? Amazing.
When's the DX11 beta?
They haven't actually said. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But pretty soon, though, I think. Pretty soon. Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot. And look, I know I want to wrap up the show here, actually, but funnily enough, there is actually a lot going on, right, over the next couple of months, weeks, right? Because, bear in mind, there's going to be the DX11 stuff and alliances before the expansion, right? And they probably want to get, like, a good amount of testing and feedback on alliances before then. So I would actually be expecting... Ooh. Wait, when was the... Wait, whoa. When was the last roadmap they posted? Was it June? Was it June?
They had a summer roadmap, yeah, in June.
Yeah, I think that was June.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Someone is trying to take the Brazil juice from Sarah, and you can't have it.
Oh.
Sorry, it's hers.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah. So
I had to look in chat.
do you guys think we're actually due a roadmap pretty soon? Like another edition of the roadmap?
Sure.
Because we haven't had one for a while, right? So maybe they would actually share a lot of dates about this stuff.
Probably as soon as they know when they're going to do the World versus World Alliances beta, then they'll give us another roadmap.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a bit of a kind of a side thing there as well. Oh, it is worth noting, actually, that Grouch is actually, you know what? I'm going to snitch. Grouch is a leak. Grouch is leaking everything. He was leaking on Indo's stream, actually. World vs. World Commander, legendary commander. He was leaking everything. He was talking about some interesting facts about World vs. World, how it isn't actually dead. Nice. And how they're going to be looking at feedback, how they won't add the siege turtle right to World vs. World unless it makes the game better, right? There's actually there's a Reddit post here that you guys can check out. It's actually definitely worth looking at. Oh yeah, wait, let's see. When was it? Guild Wars 2 Live 2021. This was April. Wow, actually, we are due a roadmap. Could it be this Tuesday? That's a very good question. Actually, it may well be this Tuesday, or maybe very shortly. Wait, when is the story coming back? The story is coming back. It's coming back this week, right? I think there's going to be the Living Story starts on August 24th, I believe, this Tuesday, or is it on? Yeah,
the 24th is this Tuesday, I think.
Dude, they could actually drop like a big bomb on Tuesday. They could like roadmap. They could do Return to Living World Season 4 and actually do a roadmap as well. Maybe that is that hopium, guys. You know what, guys? I'll tell you what. I'm gonna let the chat decide. If you guys think that is some serious overdose on hopium, go and put that in the chat, okay? Let's see if we can get that going there. But you know what? Could that be? Definitely could be. And actually, fun thing, the Steam page changed as well, guys. Now, that might be just, a nothing. Might be a bit more of a long-term thing, okay? But the Steam page actually changed very recently, by the way. So, hey, maybe even Steam coming as well. Dude, year of Guild Wars 2, decade of Guild Wars 2, century of Guild Wars 2, millennia of Guild Wars. So yeah, these devs are going to be fucking forced to develop this game forever now. Unlucky.
100 years, Guild Wars 2. All the time.
Yep. And Festival of the Four Winds, yeah, they've confirmed that is coming, guys. They just moved it so it didn't overlap with the beta. It will be coming soon. They'll probably talk about it pretty soon. I can't wait to see COI is right again. Listen, I will gloat big time. This is my strategy. You got to understand this, dude. This is my strategy. I just always predict the same thing, and eventually I'll be right, so I get to gloat. See? Good stuff.
Well, I was right by... Well, never mind. I don't want to be negative. I was going to say, I just always gave the bleakest possible outlook and made that my prediction, and I just happened to have a really good track record with doing that. which is unfortunate. But you know, the game's turned around.
Oh,
It's
I
all
just-
turned around.
I just accurately predict everything perfectly every time I predict something.
That's what happens when you're an engineer.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, I think that's a pretty good spot there. With it's like burst of inspiration about predicting the future. Well, we'll see on Tuesday.
No,
if
it
we're
can't
right.
be.
Wait, are you
Hold
going
on.
again? Like what more?
Hold on. DD Gravy says, why does Steam recommended say we need 24 gigabytes of RAM?
Oh.
That can't be real.
That's how much you need to run DX11 on this game.
Does fucking Steam say that you need 24 gigs of RAM to run Guild Wars 2?
Let me check it actually, because someone sent me the page because they said it changed recently. Let me have a look at it. Does it actually say that?
There's no way it says that.
It does actually say. Yeah, I actually can confirm. It says recommended 24 gigabytes of RAM. That is indeed accurate, my friends.
What's
It
the
does say
minimum?
that.
God.
Yep. It says minimum 6 gigabytes of RAM. Recommended
wow.
24 gigabytes of.
That's a huge range.
24?
I don't think that's intentional though. I don't think that's actually intended.
Yeah.
Because if you look at this, it says the recommended graphics card is an NVIDIA GeForce GTS 250 and Intel Iris 600 series graphics and an i3 2.8 gigahertz processor. So I don't think, okay, that it is entirely up to date there with the Steam page. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about this. I'm sure they'll fix it at some point.
Now we're over.
Yeah, now we really are over. We're not. Now it is time to actually go ahead and wrap up the show, guys. So what a show indeed. We definitely talked about a lot here. I think it was a fantastic show. Thank you very much to the host. It's awesome to have you back, Boots. I know it's been a while. You know, he betrayed us for the potato man. You know, he prefers wooden potatoes to us. It's sad but true. You know, I'm the inferior Briton, I'm afraid. But you know what?
Yeah.
We give it our all here. But thank you very much for being here. And of course, welcome, my friends, to the sellout zone. Boots, you still make a little bit of content here and there, actually. I saw a video the other day.
I do more things on other people's channels than I do on my own.
Yeah.
Like much more. But yeah, I do over on YouTube, World of Enders. I do some videos every once in a while. But yeah, you could also find me. I am technically a co-host, if not a guest host, of Hosts of Ascalon podcast. Over, they have it on Spotify, I think, and stuff. I don't know where it goes, but I know I do it on Twitch with them once a month around. Yeah, it's good. You should follow it, Hosts of Ascalon. And also, I go on Lightbringer sometime. Anyway, that's me.
Nice.
Right. Love to see it. We absolutely love to see that. And of course, Brazil, do you have any final words, perhaps conclusions? And of course, I know that you have a lot of very exciting and fantastic projects going on right now.
I do.
Would you like to share that with us once again?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I just want to say thank you if you're still watching and you didn't close the video as soon as you saw my face. I appreciate you. Lol. But otherwise, I don't know. Yeah, I do a lot of real life stuff now. I am a photographer, about to start some big projects. I take a lot of pictures, do some documentation of the homeless situation that's going on in Texas, and I'm about to start filming a full-on documentary. So that's going to probably be starting the beginning of September. It's got a little bit more stuff to get sorted out. But if you're interested in checking out what I'm doing, I'm going to link my website right here. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, wherever else. It's UWV_Preston. And if you feel so inclined, or you feel interested, I have a Patreon, but it's not for me. I don't take any of the money. I don't keep it. Patreon.com/underworldvideo. It all goes to homeless people. I'm going to be just taking the money that I get from that, distributing it out, buying supplies, stuff. So that's what I do with that. And I'm going to be posting behind-the-scenes stuff from the documentary there. I already post some other stuff over there. So if you want to check that out, it'd be cool. If you just want to buy some of my artwork, if you want to check my shit out on my website, that'd be cool too. But that's me. That's me.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff. And of course, guys, for those on YouTube, this is all going to be linked below. So hit that description and click on it and take a look at all these fun things. And of course, if you did enjoy this tea time, you can subscribe on YouTube if you're there. You can follow on Twitch as well, because it is broadcast live as well. And there's lots of other things that goes on this channel as well. You'll be always, you know, I'll be chatting with people. You'll be having impromptu tea times with a lot of the faces you actually see on the stream, just about the place on stream, discussing all aspects of the game and all that sort of stuff. And you can find me everywhere. I'm easy. Just everything /MightyTeapot, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch. Hit that stuff. Hit the follow button. Hit the subscribe. Watch everything. Go and watch every other tea time ever to have existed as well. And of course, thank you to my wonderful guests for joining up here. And of course, thank you all for watching. We very much hope you enjoyed the show. And we'll see you all in the mists. See, I got it. You couldn't do it, Brazil. Oh, yeah, because he was going to do it. He was going to do it, but I did it. So I denied him big time. There we go. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you later. Cheers.